I bought a car worth 100 grand with some elderly man's money right after my husband's funeral, Julia exclaimed with a mix of exhaustion and elation. David, her eldest son, glanced approvingly at the contract Julia had brought. Whose money are you talking about? What on earth is going on? I couldn't help but raise my voice in frustration. Despite Ashley and I mourning the loss of my husband, David and his wife seemed not only unfazed but almost pleased. The insurance money will be deposited soon, plus there should be an inheritance, Julia continued, pulling out an unexpected item from her bag, a bank book belonging to my late husband. I burst into laughter. What's so funny? You're planning to use that to buy? David started, but my laughter cut him off. I feel sorry for you because that bank book, I managed to say between gasps of laughter, is practically worthless now. My words hung in the air, turning the faces of David and his wife pale. My name is Amanda Simpson. I was married to Chris and blessed with 2 children, Ashley and David. Chris came from a family of doctors with both his parents holding medical licenses. Chris himself worked tirelessly from a young age to join their ranks, drawn by his admirable character and dedication. I got to know Chris through a friend's introduction, and we became a couple. Seeing Chris's dedication, our daughter Ashley also decided to pursue a career in medicine. Though Ashley wasn't naturally academically gifted, her diligence was evident every day. As her mother, I witnessed her efforts firsthand. I never pushed her to become a doctor, but Chris was overjoyed when she decided to pursue it on her own. Mom, I got an honor rating from medical university, Ashley exclaimed one day, achieving her dream acceptance in high school. Tears welled up in my eyes at her success. It's not just an acceptance yet, I still have to work hard without letting my guard down, Ashley added humbly. I was genuinely proud to see her grow into such a kind and resilient person. However, our eldest son, David, was quite different. Born prematurely, David had always been fragile, and I might have been overly protective of him. But as he grew, he became stronger and eventually caught up with his peers physically. He excelled academically without attending any cram schools, consistently scoring perfect marks in elementary school tests. He's grown up wonderfully, I reassured myself. But in the latter half of his middle school years, David started coming home with bruises every day. David, what happened to you? I asked with concern. They're just bruises from fights. Maybe I got into some scuffles, he shrugged off my concern. He's a boy, after all. These things happen, Chris laughed it off. In hindsight, I should have listened to Chris and let things be. But my overprotective nature towards David made me anxious. I constantly questioned him about the fights and who hurt him, which only drove him away. You're so annoying. If you ask me one more time, I'll never speak to you again, David snapped at me one day. Despite Chris's advice, I kept pushing. With every bruise that healed, another would appear. All I could do was watch over him with worry. While David was academically talented, he spent most of his time fighting and eventually attended a local public high school. I hoped that as he outgrew his teenage years, he would discuss his future or college plans. But David remained unchanged. Hey, Mom, give me some money, David demanded one day with rude language. If you think acting like a delinquent makes you cool, you're gravely mistaken, Ashley chimed in, worried about her brother's behavior. Fearing for Ashley's safety, I quickly handed David a $50 note for lunch money. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and left, leaving Ashley glaring after him. How did it come to this? Did I spoil him too much? I wondered, troubled by David's behavior every day. I couldn't help but reflect and blame myself. While his classmates prepared for university entrance exams, David remained unchanged. Chris tried to talk to him multiple times out of concern, but David started hurling abusive words at Chris. He hasn't done anything that would involve the police. He's been picked up for being out late with friends more than once or twice, Chris defended David. In the end, David neither found a job nor decided on further studies and simply graduated from high school. David, what are you going to do? You can do well if you study. Isn't it better to go to college? I'm not saying you should become a doctor, but you should get a job, I pleaded with him. David wouldn't even meet my eyes. A year later, David, who had been jobless and staying at home, approached me. Hey, he began. I thought he might be asking for money again, but when I turned to look at him, David dropped a bombshell. I'm having a kid. I'm getting married. I was left speechless from the shock. But I'll start working. Can my wife and I live here? I still don't fully understand the situation. Let's discuss this with your father first, I managed to say. That night, Chris, David, and I had a serious conversation. As parents, we came to terms with David's decision to work and his determination to start a family. We decided to accept this new chapter. On the day we were to meet his wife, Chris, Ashley, and I waited anxiously at home. David was late in returning with her, which worried us. We tried reaching out but couldn't get in touch. Contrary to our anxiety, they finally arrived just before 3:00 p.m. "We're back," David announced. "Wow, this place is massive. It's like a mansion." "It's nice to meet you. I'm Julia," the woman David brought home greeted us. Despite claiming to be pregnant, she wore high heels and a short skirt that seemed inappropriate for the chilly weather. Her long, shimmering nails held a plastic bag from a baby goods store. "Nice to meet you. I'm David's mother," I replied, taken aback by her appearance and demeanor. "You're prettier than what David described." "Nice to meet you, Amanda," Julia replied casually. Her behavior lacked any semblance of manners, leaving me simply stunned. "Where's my room?" Julia continued, unfazed. "Oh, we haven't decided yet." "Okay, I'll just leave the baby stuff in the living room then," Julia said, entering the house and heading straight for the living room. She greeted Chris and Ashley with the same casual tone. The checkout line was so long. "Sorry for being late. You all waited, right?" Julia remarked casually, making herself at home. Chris, Ashley, and I exchanged glances, speechless at her audacity. We had expected a simple greeting, but Julia acted as if she owned the place, placing a ton of luggage in the living room without a second thought. I greeted Julia again, noting she was 22 years old. Apparently, she worked part-time at a bar. As a child, her parents divorced, and she was raised by her father. However, he later disappeared, and she grew up in a children's home. It must have been tough without any family, but I couldn't excuse rudeness based on circumstances alone. Ashley then engaged Julia in conversation about her pregnancy. "How many weeks pregnant are you now? I noticed earlier you're wearing high heels. Your belly doesn't seem to be showing yet, but it's risky," Ashley expressed concern. I felt relieved hearing Ashley's caring words. David chimed in on Julia's behalf. "I thought the same. Julia apparently only has heel shoes. Buy her some, Mom." Suddenly, the conversation turned to me, catching me off guard. "Oh, don't be surprised. You probably don't know my taste, right? If you give me money, I'll choose for myself," Julia said without hesitation. I was at a loss for words at Julia's boldness. Ashley intervened sharply. "Why should Mom buy it? Why don't you, David? The baby inside me is her grandchild, isn't it?" "So what? It's your child, not hers," Julia retorted casually. Ashley was furious. Is this what a sister-in-law is supposed to be like? Hilarious. Chris remained silent, visibly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. What kind of attitude is this? She seems to be looking down on us even though we just met. However, we have to live together from now on. It wouldn't be wise to fight. I attempted to defuse the situation. In time, her maternal instincts will grow, and she'll adjust. I hoped aloud. When that time comes, she should naturally stop wearing heels and remove those nails. That's all I can hope for. Ashley, particularly concerned as a future doctor, added sharply, "Anyway, make sure you earn and buy appropriate shoes before your belly gets larger. Also, remove those nails if you can't manage a pulse oximeter. They'll definitely need to come off." With that, Ashley stormed out of the living room, locking herself in her room. Julia seemed amused but laughed when David reassured her. "Don't worry about her. She's just jealous because..." Before Julia and David's life together began, Julia went to work but neglected household chores, often using her pregnancy as an excuse. David would start jobs but frequently quit after arguments, causing headaches. Chris remained silent about their behavior, seemingly resigned to their ways. Unexpectedly, Chris collapsed at the hospital where he worked. Despite immediate treatment, he couldn't be saved. Devastated by his sudden passing, I found strength with Ashley's support to arrange his funeral. On the morning of the funeral, I told Julia, "It's fine if you stay home, Julia. Your pregnancy must make it hard for you." "Really? Okay, I'll stay home," Julia gladly accepted, understanding the custom of pregnant women not attending funerals in our region. Feeling uneasy, I noticed Dave texting Julia during the funeral. Though I warned him, I let it slide given the circumstances. After returning home, mentally and physically exhausted, Ashley and I discussed dinner in the living room when Julia descended from upstairs, handing some documents to David. "Tired, huh? Did your old man make it to heaven?" Julia remarked with a laugh. David joined in, saying, "Might be hell. You just came back from the funeral. What are you saying? Ashley snapped, furious. I lacked the energy to get angry. Come on, Ashley, just go with it. Julia shrugged, pointing at the documents she gave David. Curious, Ashley and I looked over the papers. What's this? What do you mean, go with it? I asked, my frustration growing. Chris has passed away, and while Ashley and I were grieving, you two seemed pleased instead of saddened. We'll get the insurance money, right? And there should be an inheritance, Julia continued casually, pulling out a bank book from her bag. Dad's bank book. Julia, did you take that while we were out? That's disrespectful, I exclaimed. We lived together, so it's not stealing. Besides, David knew where the bank book was, Julia retorted defiantly, glancing at David. David's silent agreement confirmed he was involved. I looked dejectedly at the bank book in Julia's hand. Chris's name was clearly written on it, but upon closer inspection, I noticed something odd about the bank book, and once I realized the cause of the inconsistency, I burst into laughter. It had been a long time since I had laughed so hard. Julia frowned at my uncontrollable laughter. What's so funny? Have you lost your mind, madam? David hurled insults at me, but I wasn't even mad anymore. All this time, I thought David was smart, but I was wrong. I feel sorry for this foolish couple, I chuckled. So, you wanted to buy a car, right? Have you signed the contract? Are you going to use that money? I feel sorry for you. Upon hearing my words, David hastily took the bank book from Julia and opened it. What the hell? There's only $3 in here, he exclaimed in shock. The couple stared at the bank book in disbelief. This is a joke. There's supposed to be an inheritance, and the insurance money should be deposited too. David fumed, echoing Julia's concern. Yes, there's an inheritance and insurance money. Both of my parents-in-law passed away early, and Chris had a lot of inherited and accumulated assets. I explained calmly. Notably, Chris wasn't just a doctor but also owned several hospitals. His total assets amounted to $1 million. However, most of those assets have been donated and are now gone. The medical fees he received from patients. He wanted to use them to help other patients. Didn't you know? He made a large donation, and it was in the newspapers. David began to tremble, realizing his ignorance of family matters and his lack of interest in reading newspapers. Moreover, the remaining money is managed in an online bank. I can't access it until we complete the inheritance procedures. What about the insurance money? When will it be deposited? Julia interjected, grabbing the bank book in a rush. Ashley, who was standing next to me, began to laugh. Don't you know, insurance money is not deposited into the account of the deceased, but to the beneficiary's account. It'll be transferred to my account and my mother's. Hearing this, Julia's grip slipped, and the bank book fell from her hands. David looked dumbfounded, and Ashley and I exchanged amused glances. What am I going to do now? I've already signed contracts, Julia muttered in disbelief. I had added so many options and they told me I couldn't cancel. Mom, please, just this once, lend me some money. David knelt beside the distraught Julia. It had been so long since he called me Mom. It felt unfamiliar, as if a stranger was asking for a favor. I don't know, figure it out yourselves. I pushed him away coldly. Today, I couldn't forgive the actions of my eldest son and his wife. I'm sure Chris felt the same. Mom, you must be tired. Let's go to bed, Ashley said, intervening. Yes, I'm not in the mood for dinner either. Ashley and I stood up, ignoring the two who were sweating in the living room, and headed to the bedroom. It seemed that during the funeral, David had been communicating with Julia about a deal. I thought they were concerned about their health, but it seemed the car was more important than their unborn child. In his lifetime, Chris always said he didn't want to leave a single penny to David and Julia. As planned, the insurance money was transferred to Ashley and me. Chris died young, and David, even after starting a family, remained unreliable. Chris had thought about what might happen after his death and left a will. According to the will, the house, real estate, and most of the remaining cash were left to me. He nominated Ashley as the successor to his hospital and bequeathed his personal investments to her. David was given a large piece of land in the countryside. As we opened the will and heard its contents, Julia said, So can't we sell the land and buy a car? Listen to the end. I interrupted Julia and continued reading. With that land and some of the cash, take $100,000 for building the house and leave this home. What does that mean? Julia exclaimed, confused. We were at the probate court. The will had been validated and carried full legal force. I explained calmly. It means exactly what it says. You get the land and money to build a house. You should be grateful. But this house should eventually belong to David, the eldest son, right? Julia looked at me as if pleading for help. I responded with a smirk. It's what I received. I decide who to give it to. You damn old woman better start packing your bags when you get home, huh? David interjected angrily. By the way, the land that Chris designated for David was about 30 miles away in the mountains. It was indeed vast but mostly untouched woodland. No matter how large the land is, if the construction cost is $100,000, the house built on it would probably be small, I remarked, knowing David and Julia, who likely had nothing, would make a fuss about the inheritance. Whether Chris gave them the land with that in mind, I don't know, but I believe Chris created an environment where Ashley and I can live peacefully. Besides, David and Julia shouldn't even have any right to receive anything. They should be grateful for whatever they can get. A few days later, a grandchild was born. Julia's water broke in the middle of the night, and she was immediately taken to the hospital after making a call. However, due to her dropping blood pressure and the hospital being understaffed at night, Julia had to have an emergency C-section. Despite repeated warnings from Ashley to remove her nail extensions, Julia didn't listen. Apparently, the nurse possibly removed them. No, I just got these done 3 days ago. Don't take them off, Julia. Don't move, the amniotic fluid is gushing out, Ashley recounted later. This confrontation was more challenging than the surgery. I've never had fancy nails like young people do, but it seems like it was painful. Julia, saved along with her child, could no longer stand up to Ashley and quickly became docile. She may have been upset about the inheritance, but she was no longer acting superior to us. I hope she's grateful that we let her rest for the first month after childbirth, Mom, Ashley said. We were wrong. Can we live here? We don't need the land or the money, David pleaded, but both Ashley and I firmly denied him. Naturally, in such a state, there was no way they could afford a car. Reluctantly, David went to cancel the car purchase and was charged a penalty fee of $10,000, which he had to pay from the $100,000 set aside for construction. Whether they were reluctant to move to the countryside or not, they thought of selling the land and renting an apartment. Still, the rent was too high for David and Julie's salaries, and there were no buyers for the vast, mostly wooded land. They realized they had no choice but to build a house on it, as stated in the will. They desperately searched for a contractor who could build a house for $90,000, but it didn't seem to be going well. The baby is still young, so I'm only letting you stay here for now. You can leave whenever you want, okay? I told them sternly. David fell silent at my words. A week later, they found a construction company, but all they could afford was a small prefabricated hut. I don't expect Julia to keep it clean, so even a small house should be fine, I told the couple who were preparing to move. You'll need to decide on daycare. Until you're settled, I can take care of the baby. You both should become independent as parents first. You're taking our child, you monster, Julia snapped at me angrily. Even with just my earnings, it's impossible to support the two of them. Let's leave our baby here till things settle, David reasoned with Julia, who was furious. No way, I'll divorce you then, Julia threatened, but David calmly replied, even if you do, you still will have a home. Realizing the futility of arguing, Julia quietly packed their things and they left. I felt sorry for the baby, but having parents like that might not make much difference. Of course, if they changed their ways, it would be best for the baby to be raised by her own parents. But I can't help but think that the baby might be happier being raised by Ashley and me, I reflected. David and Julia, who moved to their new land, contacted us almost every day. If it was about the granddaughter, I was happy to reply. But all they ever asked for was money. When ignored, they sent pictures of snack bread for dinner. Ashley laughed when she saw this. Even if they ruin their health, they won't be able to afford medical bills, Ashley chuckled. In the countryside, a car is essential. They're currently driving a used car they bought for $3,000, which frequently stalls, I noted. They might be saying this to gain our sympathy, but they don't know it's just a laughing matter for Ashley and me. They probably won't be able to take their daughter back in this situation, but I think it's okay as long as we can live with our adorable granddaughter, Ashley added. As she turned 3, she proved to be very cute, kind, and nothing like David or Julia. She was a hard worker. Ashley bought her a number puzzle, and she eagerly learned numbers and could already read letters. David and Julia are still living day by day. Occasionally, when they receive pictures of their daughter, they exclaim, "Super cute," as if looking at a stuffed toy. Ashley remarked, "It still seems impossible for the two of them to become parents. When the granddaughter grows up, I hope she can learn from her parents' mistakes and grow up straight. That's what I think."
My husband has a new stepmom, and she's pretty young, only 10 years older than me. Well, that's not the dilemma. I'm pregnant, and so is she. Now, in a family dinner, she announces that she doesn't believe the baby actually belongs to my significant other, aka her new son. Can you imagine the drama that unfolds when I demand, "Fine, how about we just take a DNA test? And besides, if I have to take a DNA test, you do too." Fair warning, this is going to be long. I just really wanted to share this with someone who isn't always caught up in a mess with me. There's a lot of background, but I promise it's worth it. My husband, Jay, and I just got back from our honeymoon a couple of weeks ago. This wedding has been a long time in the making. We've been together since high school, but friends all our lives. Since we didn't do anything big for the ceremony, we decided to go all out for the honeymoon. I'm talking a month and a half in all our favorite spots across the world. The best hotels, the best food, you name it, and we had it. I'm not saying any of this to brag. I just wanted to give you as accurate of a picture as possible. Considering we were gone for such a long time, Jay's father, my father-in-law, wanted to have a welcome back dinner to catch up. He's a total sweetheart, and both Jay and I adore him. So Jay accepted without running it by me first. Usually this would not be a problem. We get along great and have ever since I've known him, which is pretty much my whole life, considering our families used to live next door to each other. We moved closer to my mom's family after my dad passed, but since I stayed in the same school, Jay's family has been a big part of my life. Jay's stepmother is a different story though. Jay's mom passed away when we were in our junior year of college, and she and father-in-law have been separated for a while by then. But it still crushed both him and Jay to lose her. I think his heartbreak is why he moved on quickly and remarried, basically by the end of that year. Father-in-law married Jay's stepmother, whom I'll be calling mother-in-law for simplicity's sake. The year Jay and I graduated from college, it was a little weird that she was only 10 years older than us. And when they had their twins 3 years ago, I was a little concerned about father-in-law being too old to have young children. But I didn't really want to judge someone who's particularly a second father to me, especially since Jay was just happy that his father seemed happy. Mother-in-law, on the other hand, had no trouble judging. From the get-go, she was super competitive whenever it came to anything to do with me. If Jay bought me a necklace, she had father-in-law buy her a more expensive one. If somebody mentioned that I made a good apple pie, she would just happen to make one the next day. She even announced her pregnancy at a dinner celebrating my promotion. I don't know if she's jealous of my relationship with father-in-law or what, which aside from being super gross implications, is just plain unwarranted. But she's been awful to me since we met. I've never brought it up with my father-in-law because I don't want to cause problems in his marriage. But whenever I've said anything to Jay, he just brushes it off and says stuff like I'm reading too much into stuff. When I brought up the pregnancy announcement, his only defense was that father-in-law was hosting the dinner, so technically she was allowed to announce whatever the heck she wanted in her own home. It's been a huge point of contention between us. When we decided to get married, I made it a point that he would have to be on my side from this point on. I get that she was his stepmother, but I was going to be his wife. He agreed, and that was that. So we get married, and I could not be happier. When Jay told me that he'd accepted father-in-law's invitation for dinner, I was a bit hesitant, to say the least. We had just gotten back from the happiest weeks of our lives, and I did not want mother-in-law to ruin that. Jay convinced me by saying that it would be the perfect time to announce my pregnancy. We found out that I was pregnant about 6 weeks before we got married, and we decided not to tell anyone just yet, aside from my mom, who was with me when I did the test. And since we were planning on getting married eventually anyway, we decided to elope. Our families were shocked, but ultimately, my mom and Jay's dad were happy for us. especially considering we've been together for such a long time. Father-in-law paid for our honeymoon as a wedding present, which his travel agent handled completely. It was a dream, I could not imagine how happy he would be when we announced that I was pregnant with his first grandchild. I agreed to go, but told Jay that if mother-in-law tried to pull anything, I would not be tolerating it. Jay agreed and promised to have my back, no matter what. Father-in-law loves hosting dinners in his home. We chose an intimate setting to announce the pregnancy. Things seemed fine when we arrived, and father-in-law warmly hugged both of us. Even though mother-in-law only hugged Jay, we exchanged polite smiles, and I thought that was the end of it. We chatted in the sitting room for a while before moving to the dining room for dinner, where father-in-law served us each a glass of wine. Thinking it was a good time, I politely declined the wine, stating that we wouldn't be having any drinks for the upcoming months. It took father-in-law a moment to catch on, but Jay burst out, "Dad, we're pregnant." This finally got a reaction out of him, and he was overjoyed. Putting down the wine, he gave me a hug, asking when we found out and if we knew the gender yet. Mother-in-law, however, remained completely silent during father-in-law's congratulations and only spoke up when things calmed down, suggesting we sit down to eat. It wasn't her I wanted to share the news with anyway. As we sat down to eat, father-in-law spent most of the dinner asking us questions about the honeymoon and the pregnancy. He and Jay excitedly discussed fatherhood and the kind of father Jay would be. It was heartwarming to see my husband so excited about our growing family. At that moment, I knew I had picked the right man to start a family with. Mother-in-law kept interjecting into their talk, mainly discussing what the twins were like when they were newborns and how Jay's dad had reacted when they were born. Essentially, she redirected the attention back to herself and her kids. When I mentioned the crib we were considering buying for the nursery, she suggested we wait, stating we didn't know where we would be once the baby's born. Confused, I pressed her, and she insinuated that Jay and I might not be together when the baby is born. At this point, I was annoyed and getting angry. I asked her why she thought that, and she brought up our history of breaking up and getting back together. I defended our relationship, stating that every couple has ups and downs, and we're married adults, not emotional teenagers. My voice may have been raised, but considering the accusations, I think it was reasonable. Father-in-law tried to calm her down, but she was determined to say her piece. I told Jay I wanted to go home, and before he could stand up, she insisted he get a paternity test before buying the crib. Father-in-law immediately told her to shut up, and Jay walked me out, fuming on the entire car ride home. I was upset not only at mother-in-law, but also at Jay, who had promised to have my back. He sat silently while his stepmother tore me apart. He assured me he would handle it and let mother-in-law know her behavior wasn't okay, but I'll believe it when I see it. Crushed by the hurtful words from someone important to my husband and father-in-law, I've only confided in my best friend, who thinks mother-in-law may be jealous of the relationship I have with Jay and father-in-law. I hope this isn't a sign of how my pregnancy will go, and if anyone has had similar experiences, please share below. More than anything, I'm just upset that what was supposed to be a happy moment got ruined by my mother-in-law. Top comments from the original post express similar sentiments. Comment number 1 states that this isn't just a mother-in-law problem, it's a husband problem. The commenter points out that the husband should have stood up for me the moment the mother-in-law opened her mouth, especially after promising to have my back. There's concern about whether this is a recurring issue and if the husband will continue to remain silent in the face of such situations. The commenter suggests reaching out to a support system and preparing for a potential future of defending myself and my child if the husband doesn't step up. Comment number 2 takes a different perspective, suggesting that the marriage might have happened solely because of the pregnancy, not mature love. The commenter speculates about the possibility that the baby isn't the husband's, hence the mother-in-law's demand for a paternity test. There's an implication that the mother-in-law might know something that the father-in-law and stepson don't. The commenter advises me to admit any jealousy towards the mother-in-law, projecting that she married a stable family man while I was strung along for 10 years with an on and off again boyfriend. In the first update, I acknowledged the husband's failure to defend me adequately and our subsequent discussion about the need for him to speak up sooner in the future. There's mention of the impossibility of limiting contact with the in-laws due to Jay's work with his father, who runs several restaurants. The family's closeness is highlighted, and the difficulty of implementing low or no contact during pregnancy is explained. The update concludes with relief that an upcoming family event won't involve seeing the mother-in-law. Moving to the actual update, a dinner meeting is arranged with the father-in-law and mother-in-law to sort things out. Despite my preference for a neutral location, the father-in-law insists on hosting again. The dinner doesn't even begin before Jay addresses the issue, expressing regret for not saying anything the last time. He firmly informs his stepmother that her suggestion was ridiculous and unwarranted, emphasizing his trust in my loyalty. Father-in-law apologizes for letting the situation persist. When the mother-in-law attempts to apologize, I request that she waits until I've spoken. I acknowledge my raised voice, but explain that it was warranted given the implications of her statement. I agree to a paternity test, but only if she undergoes one as well, pointing out the inconsistency in her questioning the parentage of my unborn child, while never questioning her own children's paternity. When I tell you that I've never witnessed a grown woman losing her composure as loudly as she did, you'd be genuinely shocked by the volume she reached. She immediately tried to throw herself at me across the coffee table, her words becoming completely unintelligible by that point. I won't repeat the things she said to me, but Jay and I removed ourselves from the situation right away. It's been a day since we went over, and Jay has been on the phone with his father almost continuously since the twins have been with Jay's aunt since yesterday afternoon. I think they'll remain there until father-in-law can get my mother-in-law to calm down. This is definitely not over yet, but I hope everything calms down soon for the sake of the children. Update number 2. Before I go on with the update, I want to thank everyone who read and responded to my initial post and update. They were long, venting out years of built-up stress into these extensive texts. I'm grateful that people took the time to reply with their experiences. Despite the unfortunate commonality of similar stories, it's hopeful to hear about situations that have improved. I've received mixed responses about agreeing to the paternity test only if she did it too, which I expected. Honestly, it's the only solution that seemed moderately fair to me. Anyways, on to the meat of the update. I did end up going through with the test. As insulting as it was, I knew that if I didn't, there would always be that lingering shred of doubt. And that's not the family I want to bring my child into. I chose a doctor who runs his own practice, a friend of mine. He collected the samples, and the results would be available in a few days. Shockingly, the child is my husband's. Jay wasn't surprised when I told him, but I could sense some tension released from his conscience. Considering the emotional turmoil my mother-in-law put me through, I didn't stop there. I didn't do anything drastic. Nobody was harmed. My condition for going through with the test was that mother-in-law gets her own children checked, and I intended to go through with that regardless of her participation. The twins were with Jay's aunt, and I managed to get Jay's cousin to get a cheek swab of each of them, just to bring to my doctor friend. We ran the twins against Jay, which served the same purpose. The emotion I felt when it came back that the twins were not related to Jay was mixed. On one hand, I was vindicated that mother-in-law had been projecting, but on the other hand, the lives of these innocent children were about to be uprooted because their mother had to butt into other people's business. Currently, the only person aware of these results is Jay. We're taking some time to decide on the next step, as we don't want to harm the twins, regardless of whether they're related to Jay. If anything comes of it, I'll post an update, but for now, we just want to do what's best for our family. Update number 3. I'm gutted, absolutely gutted, and have no idea what to do. I feel completely blindsided and betrayed by the man who promised me forever and is now siding with a woman who verbally abused me in his home. Father-in-law and mother-in-law called us over yesterday afternoon. I had hoped that mother-in-law had finally come to her senses and was ready to apologize for everything she said to me. Unfortunately, I could not have been further from the truth. Upon arriving at the house, I already knew that something was off. Father-in-law usually greets us at the door with a warm hug and smile, but this time, he just held the door open silently and then went to sit beside mother-in-law in the dining room. No tea and snacks in the sitting room, no quick catch-up, nothing. We followed and sat down across from them. Father-in-law passed us a stack of papers and asked us if we knew that they were the results of the paternity test that my friend had performed for my child and the twins. I was completely caught off guard, as there was no way that father-in-law and mother-in-law should have access to those documents, as neither Jay nor I had contacted them about it. Jay was just as confused as I was, but father-in-law did not give us time to process anything before passing us another set of papers, both regarding the twins' parentage. It stated that Jay was the half-brother of both twins, which clearly contradicted the results on the first set of papers. Father-in-law explained that they had conducted a DNA test at a local clinic, saying that he had recently run a DNA test for the twins at the request of a relative. He felt obligated as a doctor to inform the parents of the situation. My friend had contacted father-in-law to tell him about the paternity test that I had him perform on the twins. But he didn't stop there. Father-in-law revealed that my friend sent over the results along with edited documents that stated the twins had no relation to Jay. My friend told him that I requested the documents to be edited. Jay asked me if this was true, but I was so caught off guard by the betrayal of my friend that I just froze. Unfortunately, father-in-law took this as an invitation to keep speaking. This is a man I've looked up to for most of my life, whom I held as a father figure after the death of my own father. And he had no remorse in telling my husband, his own son, that my friend had edited the results of my own paternity test. He had absolutely no empathy for the fact that I just wanted to give my child the best possible father it could have. I wanted Jay to be the father. I just don't see what father-in-law gains from tearing down everything that I was trying to build for my family. The whole time, mother-in-law just sat there with this stupid, smug look on her face, not saying a word. It was her fault any of this was happening in the first place, and she just sat there and smiled at me as though I was at fault for wanting to ensure that my children had a stable life with a reliable father. Jay was absolutely livid. I've never seen the man I love so angry, let alone directed at me. At first, I hoped that I could reason with him, but when it became crystal clear that he was unwilling to listen to me, I called my mother to come pick me up. I've been with her for the last few days, and Jay has not tried to contact me. Father-in-law and mother-in-law have not picked up any of my calls or responded to any of my text messages. My friend, the doctor who caused this whole mess, has completely ghosted me on everything. I plan to go down to his practice to confront him soon, but I just want to fix things with Jay first. I simply don't know what to do. I don't know how my life went from the perfect honeymoon and designing my dream nursery to this. Update number 4. For those of you tearing me apart in the comments section, you'll be happy to hear that Jay and I are separated. He told me that he's looking into an annulment. Father-in-law had the audacity to contact my mother about everything that happened, and even she's not happy with me right now. I'm completely isolated and alone, and the only person still on my side is my best friend, who has supported me through this whole mess without judgment. I really tried to remove myself from the situation and take the high road, but considering father-in-law's lack of tact and his willingness to interfere with my family, I just decided that I would fight fire with fire. I can't be bothered with people like the doctor who went behind my back to contact Jay's family. There are no records of our interactions, and pursuing that angle would be an all-around pointless matter for me. However, I mentioned in a previous update that father-in-law runs a few restaurants in my city. The way that he was able to grow his business so quickly was by employing cheap immigrant workers. Of course, father-in-law was more than willing to turn a blind eye if they happened to be undocumented, provided they did good work. Unfortunately for father-in-law, a good Samaritan alerted the relevant authorities to this fact, and considering. I have not been in contact with either my husband or his family since the ambush at dinner. I only know what little my mother tells me about it. From what I've heard, father-in-law has been fined a few thousand, and it's possible that his business license will be suspended. This would impact not only his livelihood and approaching retirement, but also Jay, quite a few other members of the extended family who were involved in the business. While it pains me to see a family that I held so dear for so long go through such a difficult time, I can't help but feel that this is karma. Father-in-law could not keep his wife out of my family's business, and now his family business is under fire. I wish I knew how Jay felt about all this. If we had not been separated, I would be doing my best to support him during this trying time for both him and his family. It's with a heavy heart that I've resigned myself to watching their hard work and livelihood go up in flames. None of this would be happening if mother-in-law had simply chosen to be happy for us and welcome our child into the family with open arms, just as we had welcomed her and her twins. I sincerely hope that they're able to heal from this, but for now, I'll just have to prioritize myself and my child. I don't have time to care about their family drama anymore. Update number 5. I never thought I'd be coming back to update, but since my last post, here I am. I don't know what ended up happening with my former father-in-law's business license, and frankly, I don't care. Jay and his family are dead to me, and they can continue living their picture-perfect life far away from me. I do know that he had to pay a hefty fine, and one of Jay's uncles, whom Jay was never a fan of, has taken over father-in-law's position for now. Overall, I'm more than happy with how my life has gone since exiting the toxic family. I've moved back in with my mom, who loves the company. She's come around to my point of view, given her desire to have a healthy relationship with her grandchildren, which I was so happy to see. The biggest update is that I've since started seeing the soon-to-be father of my child. We connected during a break that Jay and I were on before our engagement, and have since reconnected through a friend of my best friend. I'll be due any day now, and the father of my child will be by my side every step of the way. I'm overjoyed that I'll be able to bring my little bundle of joy into a complete family with a mother and a father who will love them unconditionally. So, thank you to those who commented on and interacted with my post positively, and to those of you who DM'd me support and my choices despite the onslaught of hate and ridicule from other commenters. It means more to me than I could ever express. I hope that each of you was able to find a happy ending that I know we all deserve. Top comments from the original post and all the updates. Comment number 1. I'm just glad everything worked out for you in the end. I know I'm going to get attacked from commenters into oblivion, but I don't care. You clearly have so much love in your heart for your family and your unborn child, and you just want to create the best possible life for them. I completely empathize as someone who grew up in a broken home with parents who were constantly at war with each other. I wish that my mother had done what you tried to do. Lord knows we would have had a better life today if she did. All the love and light to you and your kid. May your little family find peace away from the mess in your past, and may your relationship with your partner grow stronger every day. Comment number 2. I don't even know what to say. I mean, lady, you're crazy. This is what they say, don't stick your something in crazy. Did you report his father to the authorities? You might have gotten this man's livelihood taken away. I mean, a man with 2 young children that you claim to love and want the best for, like, holy hell, you're insane. I don't even want to get into the fact that you convinced a doctor to falsify test results so that you could, get your ex-mother-in-law thrown out. Like, what was even the goal there? Not even getting into the ethics of a doctor actually going through with what he did. The fact that you're trying to frame it as a betrayal of your trust is unhinged. I actually don't know how to react. Like, this can't be real, right? Please tell me that this type of crazy isn't just roaming the streets and procreating. God help your child. Get some help? OP. Okay, so what we just had revealed to us in these last 2 comments that we reviewed are completely opposite opinions. The very first comment is basically 100% in the backing of OP. The second comment said OP is a crazy lady. I mean, everything that she did, From the faking of the documents to getting the doctor friend to help, it just all led to pure toxicness. But I want to know, do you guys think that maybe it was justified given the mother-in-law's attitude throughout the whole story, and OP just wanted some sort of revenge? I want to know your thoughts about that. So go ahead, drop it down below in our comment section, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. My name is Mr. Reddit, and I narrate these sorts of stories every single day. So if you want to be a part of these, all you have to do is subscribe. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.
The crystal chandelier glittered above the white tablecloth as waiters in crisp black uniforms circled with silver trays of appetizers. Richardson's was Boston's most exclusive restaurant, the kind of place where reservations were hereditary and the menu didn't list prices. I adjusted my tie nervously, feeling like an imposter despite my carefully tailored suit. Across from me, Sophie smiled encouragingly, reaching under the table to squeeze my hand. We'd been dating for 2 years, but this was my first formal introduction to her extended family. Her father, Gregory Davidson, sat at the head of the table, occasionally checking his Patek Philippe watch as if our dinner was cutting into more important engagements. So Michael, he began after the sommelier had poured an expensive Bordeaux for everyone except my parents, who had requested water. Sophia tells me you're a teacher? He pronounced the word as if describing an exotic disease. Yes, sir. High school physics at Westridge Academy. Admirable. He nodded, not looking admirable at all. Starting salary for teachers these days is what, 40,000? 47 actually, I corrected politely, plus summers for research. Gregory exchanged glances with his brother Charles, a hedge fund manager whose Ferrari was probably being valeted outside. Research. I see. My parents sat quietly across the table. Dad in his dependable navy suit that he wore to church and special occasions, Mom in a simple dress she'd bought on sale at Macy's. They looked uncomfortable but dignified, determined to make a good impression despite the obvious wealth disparity. And your family business is? Gregory turned to my father, eyebrows raised. Robert owns a hardware store, my mother answered proudly. Callahan's Hardware in Worcester. It's been in the family for 3 generations. Charles nearly choked on his wine. A hardware store. Quaint. Very entrepreneurial, added Gregory's wife Victoria, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head condescendingly. I felt heat rising in my face, but Sophia jumped in. Michael's father gives incredible advice. He helped us fix up our apartment last summer. I'm sure he did. Gregory nodded, signaling for more wine. Though I imagine you'll be moving somewhere more suitable once you're married. Perhaps that high-rise development near the financial district? I know the developer. We're happy where we are, Sophia replied firmly. We had this conversation before. Her parents couldn't understand why their Stanford-educated daughter chose to live in a modest apartment on a teacher's salary when she could easily join her father's investment firm. So, Mr. Callahan, Charles leaned forward, swirling his wine. Do you find that people still shop at local hardware stores? With the big box retailers everywhere these days. My father smiled mildly. We do all right. Our customers appreciate personal service and expertise. I'll bet they do, Gregory chuckled. Though I can't imagine the margins are anything to write home about. Victoria touched her pearl necklace delicately. Do you handle the accounting yourself, or? My wife manages the books, Dad replied, nodding toward Mom. Sarah has always had a head for numbers. How resourceful, Victoria smiled thinly, keeping it all in the family. As the appetizers arrived, Sophia's cousin Bradley, fresh from his MBA at Wharton, decided to join in. A teacher's salary in Boston. How do you even survive? The table erupted in laughter, and I felt Sophia's hand tighten around mine under the tablecloth. My parents exchanged a glance but said nothing. We managed just fine, I said evenly. Oh, I'm sure you manage, Gregory chuckled, making air quotes. But marriage is expensive, and children even more so. Sophia was raised with certain standards. Dad, Sophia warned, but Gregory waved her off. It's a legitimate concern, princess. Michael seems like a wonderful young man, but practical matters matter. The Davidsons have certain financial expectations. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I would have ignored it, but the screen showed my father's office number, strange for a Friday evening. I'm sorry, I should take this. It might be important. I excused myself and stepped away from the table. Michael? It's Dad. Everything okay? Yes, but I need to speak with you and Mr. Davidson. Something's come up with his loan application. I frowned, confused. His what? His loan application. To the foundation. Could you put me on speaker when you get back to the table? Sure, Dad. When I returned, the conversation had moved on to Bradley's new position at Goldman Sachs. I cleared my throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, but my father needs to speak with Mr. Davidson. About a loan application. Gregory's fork clattered against his plate. What loan application? He asked me to put him on speaker, I said, still confused. I set my phone in the center of the table and pressed the speaker button. Mr. Davidson, Robert Callahan here. I apologize for interrupting your dinner. Gregory straightened his tie, composing himself. Callahan, what's this about a loan application? There must be some mistake. No mistake, sir. I'm calling about Davidson Development's application to the Callahan Foundation for the Downtown Revitalization Project. $50 million, if I recall correctly. The table went silent. Charles froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. What? Gregory stammered, color draining from his face. The board just approved it unanimously. I wanted to let you know right away since you marked it urgent. Shall I have the funds transferred Monday morning, or would you prefer immediate processing? There'd be a small expediting fee, of course. Gregory stared at the phone, then at my father across the table, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. You're Robert Callahan, of the Callahan Foundation. My father nodded simply. Yes, though I prefer Bob in social settings. Victoria's hand flew to her pearls. The Callahan Foundation that funded the new wing at Mass General? That owns half the waterfront. 30% of the waterfront, my mother corrected gently. We've diversified in recent years. I sat frozen, as confused as everyone else at the table. The Callahan Foundation. My parents had never mentioned any foundation. Mr. Davidson. My father's voice continued from the speaker. About that transfer. Gregory swallowed hard. Monday is fine, Mr. Callahan. Thank you. Excellent. We can discuss details at the board reception next week. Sarah and I look forward to seeing you there. Enjoy your dinner. The call ended, leaving an awkward silence broken only by the ambient restaurant noise around us. Charles was the first to recover, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. Well, Robert, you've been holding out on us? My father took a sip of water. Not at all. You simply never asked about the foundation. We like to keep the hardware store as our public face. Keeps us grounded. The hardware store is a cover? Bradley asked incredulously. Not a cover, my mother clarified. It's where Robert's grandfather started. We maintain it out of respect for our roots and because we believe in honest work. The foundation grew from those principles. I stared at my parents, strangers suddenly in familiar faces. Why did you ever tell me? Mom reached across to touch my hand. We wanted you to find your own way without the burden of the family name. You chose teaching because you love it, not because you were rebelling against or conforming to family expectations. Gregory had gone from pale to flushed. The Callahan Foundation assets are, what exactly? Last quarter. Just under $12 billion, my mother replied matter-of-factly. We've had a good year. Victoria nearly dropped her fork. Billion? With a B? Philanthropy has been very good to us, Dad said mildly. Though we find that how you give matters more than how much. Gregory turned to me, his expression completely transformed. Michael, I had no idea. Please accept my apologies for any misunderstanding earlier. No apology necessary, I replied automatically, still processing this revelation. Sophia was staring at me, her expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was shocked, amused, or angry that I'd never shared this information I myself hadn't known. If you'll excuse us, she said suddenly, standing and taking my hand. Michael and I need a moment. She led me to a quiet alcove near the restaurant's entrance, away from prying eyes and ears. Did you know? She demanded immediately. Sophia, I swear I had no idea. The hardware store, our house in Worcester, everything has always been solidly middle class. Comfortable but modest. She searched my face, then burst out laughing. Oh my God, your father is incredible. Did you see Dad's face? I thought he was going to swallow his tongue. Her reaction broke the tension, and I found myself laughing too. I'm still in shock. $12 billion? My allowance growing up was $20 a week, and I had to mow the lawn for that. She grew serious, taking both my hands in hers. Why do you think they kept it from you? I thought about it, remembering countless childhood lessons about the value of hard work, the importance of earning respect rather than buying it, the responsibility that came with privilege. I think they wanted me to understand the value of things that money can't buy, to know who I was apart from wealth or status. And who are you, Michael Callahan? Sophia asked softly. The same person I was 20 minutes ago. A physics teacher who loves explaining how the universe works. The guy who fell in love with a brilliant woman who chose a meaningful career over a corner office in her father's company. I hesitated. Does this change anything for you? She shook her head firmly. Not a thing. Though I admit I'm enjoying watching my family squirm after the way they treated your parents. When we returned to the table, the dynamic had shifted dramatically. Gregory was engaged in animated conversation with my father about community development initiatives. Victoria was showing my mother pictures of her charity committee's recent gala, while Charles and Bradley listened attentively to every word my parents spoke. As we took our seats, Gregory raised his glass. A toast to Michael and Sophia, and to new family connections that promised to be enlightening. The evening continued with newfound warmth, though I noticed my parents remained exactly as they had been, polite, unpretentious, and quietly dignified. They answered questions about the foundation's work without boasting, deflected inquiries about their personal wealth, and consistently steered conversations toward community impact rather than financial returns. After dessert, as we waited for the valet to bring around our cars, my father pulled me aside. Son, I owe you an explanation. You think, I replied, but without anger. He smiled apologetically. Your grandfather built something remarkable from that little hardware store, not just a business, but a philosophy about wealth and responsibility. When he established the foundation, he was clear about its purpose: to do good quietly, without seeking recognition or power. So you let me believe we were just ordinary? There's no such thing as just ordinary, Michael. Every person has value independent of their bank account. We wanted you to know your own worth before you knew your inheritance. And when were you planning to tell me? After the wedding, actually. We have a whole presentation prepared, he chuckled. Though I admit, I accelerated the timeline a bit tonight. I couldn't sit there and watch that man dismiss you and your mother. I shook my head, amazed. All these years, I've been applying for scholarships, working summer jobs, budgeting carefully. And those experiences shaped you into someone who understands the value of education, hard work, and financial responsibility. Would you trade that understanding for a childhood of privilege? Before I could answer, the Davidson family approached, led by Gregory with an entirely new demeanor. Robert, Sarah, we'd love to have you over to the house soon. Perhaps next weekend. A small gathering, just family. That sounds lovely, my mother replied graciously. Though we'd be equally happy to host you at our home in Worcester. It's modest, but the garden is beautiful this time of year. Victoria, who had probably never set foot in a suburb like Worcester in her life, nodded enthusiastically. We'd be delighted. Wouldn't we, Gregory? As we said our goodbyes, Sophia squeezed my hand and whispered, Your parents are amazing. They really are, I agreed, watching as they climbed into their 10-year-old Volvo. A car they clearly could have replaced with a fleet of luxury vehicles at any time. On the drive home, I called my parents on speakerphone so Sophia could hear. So, $12 billion? I asked without preamble. My mother laughed. 11.8 technically, and most of it is in the foundation, committed to various causes. But still, I was still struggling to reconcile this new reality with my understanding of my family. Michael, my father said gently, nothing important has changed. We're still the same people with the same values. The only difference is that now you understand the responsibility that will eventually be yours. The hardware store is a profitable small business that employs 15 people and serves a community that would otherwise have to drive 20 minutes to a big box store. It matters, son. Sophia leaned toward the phone. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, I just want to say, thank you for raising someone who chose to teach because he loves it, not because he had to. We're the ones who should be thanking you, Sophia, My mother replied warmly, "For loving our son when all you knew was that he was a teacher from a family that owned a hardware store." After we hung up, Sophia and I drove in contemplative silence for a while. "Does it bother you?" I finally asked. "That I never knew. That I can't even claim I was rejecting wealth on principle. I just had no idea it existed." She considered this. "What bothers me is thinking about how differently my family would have treated you if they'd known from the beginning. How differently they might have treated someone else in your position who didn't happen to have a secret fortune." "Me too," I admitted. "So what now? Do you quit teaching and join the family foundation?" I shook my head firmly. "Absolutely not. I love my job. Though I might talk to my parents about establishing a scholarship fund for students interested in STEM education." She smiled. "That sounds perfect." Later that night, after dropping Sophia at her apartment, I drove to my own modest one-bedroom, seeing it through new eyes. I could move tomorrow to a penthouse, buy a sports car, live a completely different life. The possibility was dizzying. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and called my parents again. "I need to understand everything," I told them. "The foundation, the responsibilities, the expectations. If I'm going to be part of this legacy, I want to do it right." My father's voice was warm with pride. "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. Come home this weekend, we'll start at the beginning. And Sophia, bring her," my mother said without hesitation. "She's family now." As I hung up, I realized that while my understanding of my family had been upended, the core truths remained unchanged. My parents had always valued character over wealth, service over status, and genuine connections over social climbing. The revelation of our financial situation didn't change who we were. It just added responsibility to the values they'd already instilled. 3 months later, Sophia and I were married in a ceremony that balanced elegance with meaning. The Davidson family, still slightly shell-shocked by the revelation of the Callahan fortune, had become noticeably more humble. Gregory had even started showing genuine interest in community development beyond its profit potential. At the reception, my father clinked his glass for the traditional toast. Guests fell silent, many of them still adjusting to the idea that unassuming Robert Callahan from a hardware store was actually Robert Callahan of the Callahan Foundation. When Sarah and I decided to keep our foundation work separate from our family life, he began, "We did so believing that wealth should be a tool for good, not a measure of worth. We wanted Michael to define himself by his character, not his inheritance." He turned to me and Sophia. "Today, as we celebrate your marriage, we couldn't be prouder of the choice you made, to find someone who values you for exactly who you are, not what you have." He raised his glass. "May you build a life together that remains true to itself, regardless of circumstance. And may you always remember that the greatest fortune isn't measured in dollars, but in how many lives you touch for the better." As glasses raised around the room, I caught Gregory Davidson's eye. The arrogance that had so defined him at our first dinner had given way to something resembling respect, not for the Callahan wealth, but perhaps finally for the Callahan values. And that, I realized, was the point of my parents' long deception, to ensure that when the truth eventually emerged, we would all understand that true worth had nothing to do with net worth at all.
I'm Sarah, a digital artist by profession, and someone who takes solace in the comfort of my home. I take pride in both my creative work and my modest yet warm abode. This made the decision to marry a significant one for me. Mark, a confident professional working in a reputable company, appeared to be the perfect choice. Charming, intelligent, and hailing from a respectable family. Little did I know, appearances can be deceiving. The first cracks in what I thought was an ideal life surfaced during the wedding planning process. It became a constant power struggle between me and Mark's traditional-minded mother, Alice. She insisted on a grand, old-fashioned wedding with elaborate floral arrangements, fancy table settings, and uncomfortable family traditions. As the wedding day approached, anxiety set in. Despite my efforts to maintain a joyful facade, something felt off. Mark seemed distant, like a spectator at his own wedding. However, what truly stung was Alice's behavior. Stepping out of the car in my carefully chosen wedding dress, I felt her judgmental eyes scrutinizing everything from my attire to my complexion. In a cold tone, she criticized my dress, leaving me embarrassed. Mark remained silent, failing to defend me. As the day unfolded, Alice became determined to find fault in every detail: the music, the food, and even my 12-year-old sister's table manners. Attempting to intervene and defend my sister only led to Alice asserting that discipline starts young, as if I needed correction. During the toast, Alice couldn't conceal her disapproval, offering wishes for a joy-filled life that her eyes betrayed as insincere. Looking to Mark for support, I found none. He avoided my gaze, making me realize that the love we spoke of may have been a facade. It became clear that I was alone in this marriage, caught between a husband unwilling to stand by me and a mother-in-law determined to make my life miserable. Our wedding day, meant to mark the beginning of a happy life together, felt more like the opening chapter of a somber tale as we departed for our honeymoon. I clutched my bouquet tightly, using it as a makeshift shield, fully aware that more challenges lay ahead. The wedding, instead of being a joyous celebration, felt like a forewarning of the difficulties that awaited us. After a strangely quiet honeymoon, Mark and I moved into my house. Initially excited about the prospect of married life filled with love and happiness, my optimism waned when I realized that Alice, Mark's mother, considered my home a territory she needed to control. Within a few weeks of our marriage, Alice started making unannounced visits, asserting herself as if she owned the place. Each visit was rife with criticism and passive-aggressive comments, turning my once peaceful home into a battleground. One evening, I eagerly prepared dinner using a new recipe I had found online, hoping to share it with Mark. However, when Alice saw it, she wrinkled her nose and insulted my cooking skills. Despite my attempts to explain, she mocked me, and to my dismay, Mark sided with her. On another occasion, Alice criticized my living room decorations, claiming they clashed with the furniture. Despite the effort I had put into it, she made fun of my choices, and once again, Mark didn't stand up for me. Instead, he suggested that I could use Alice's help next time, making me feel like my home was being taken over. The painful realization struck me that the man who promised to support me not only allowed this emotional harm, but also joined in. Feeling utterly alone, I couldn't comprehend the depth of the isolation I experienced. Both Mark and Alice seemed determined to disrupt the peace I had cherished in my home. Hoping for improvement, I longed for Mark's support, and I naively believed that Alice might grow tired of bitterness. However, my hopes were shattered when one evening, Alice arrived at our door with bags and boxes, declaring that she was moving in with us. Shocked, I questioned Mark about this decision, but he seemed fine with it. As Alice began unpacking, treating her move as a final decision, I pulled Mark aside, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. I expressed to him that it simply couldn't happen. Our marriage was already strained, and Alice moving in would only exacerbate the situation. Mark sided with his mother, insisting that we needed to adjust to her presence. Frustrated, I questioned when he would adjust for me and stand up for our home and marriage. Mark avoided my gaze, claiming it would be rude to ask her to leave, and so, Alice moved in, plunging me deeper into my nightmare. Her relentless criticism extended to everything, from how I arranged the furniture to how I did the laundry, and even how I breathed. Mark remained silent, allowing her behavior to persist. Yet it wasn't just the constant nitpicking that wore me down. I stumbled upon a bag of prescription medications hidden in the kitchen one day, pills for anxiety, depression, and sleep disorders. When I confronted Alice about it, she became angry, asserting that I had no right to snoop around. Mark sided with her, claiming they were her private matters. It was a colossal betrayal, leaving me feeling numb. It became evident that Alice wasn't merely a difficult mother-in-law. She was akin to a predator, dismantling my defenses and seizing control of my life. Mark wasn't just distant or uninterested. He was part of the problem, contributing to the destruction of our marriage. In that moment, As I'd witnessed Alice's smug smile and Mark avoiding my gaze, I made a pivotal decision. I refused to be a passive spectator to this tragedy unfolding before me. It was time to take charge of my life, even if it meant distancing myself from those who were supposed to be my family. However, fate had another surprise in store for me, pushing me to finally put an end to the act my life had become. After Alice unexpectedly moved into my home, my life transformed into a never-ending nightmare. She scrutinized my every move, critiqued me for the smallest things, and her presence loomed over me like a dark cloud. Personal attacks became the norm, insulting my love, looks, intelligence, and even questioning my abilities as a spouse. One evening in the living room, Alice launched an attack on my career, or what she perceived as a lack thereof. According to her, a good wife should have a job, and she doubted I could do anything worthwhile. I defended myself, asserting that I did indeed have a job, and my income played a crucial role in our household. However, Alice remained unconvinced, questioning why we resided in my modest house instead of a grander one that reflected her son's dignity. Before I could respond, Mark, who had been absorbed in his phone, sided with his mother. He remarked that I could do more, and we could aspire to a better life. It stung deeply, feeling like a profound betrayal. Mark left the room, and in a hushed tone, Alice whispered, "He'll always be my son. You're just the girl he settled for." Turning away, I grappled with a mix of anger and embarrassment. As I gazed at our wedding photo, I pondered how my love story had transformed into a cruel drama. The nightmare intensified when I discovered an unidentified packet of pills hidden in the kitchen. Confronting Alice led to her anger, dismissing it as none of my business. When Mark entered the room, he scolded me for snooping, revealing there was no us in this marriage. Mark wasn't merely failing to protect me, he was taking Alice's side. I felt like a stranger in my own home, suffocating under their combined disapproval. Yet their actions fueled my determination not to be broken. I would endure this nightmare. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. Mark's friend Jake invited us to a party, and despite my reservations, I was coerced into attending. The request felt more like an order, and we found ourselves at Jake's lavish house. The party offered a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere at home, providing a temporary escape from Alice's grip and the strained relationship with Mark. Laughter filled the air, music played, and for a brief moment, I could almost forget the daily battles and criticisms. As the evening unfolded, I found myself conversing with Jake, Mark's friend, and the host of the party. Jake's friendly and approachable demeanor sharply contrasted with Alice's cold judgment. We discussed various topics, and engaging in a conversation free from criticisms and insults felt refreshing. Jake suggested a party game, a welcome change from the toxic atmosphere at home, and I hesitantly agreed. During the game, I shared a story from the early days of our marriage, highlighting the challenges and lessons we had learned. The room echoed with laughter as I recounted some of the humorous mishaps we had experienced. It felt liberating to share a part of our story, even if only in a game. Afterward, Jake pulled me aside, expressing concern about my situation at home. He had observed the tension and encouraged me to stand up for myself, refusing to let them mistreat me further. His words were a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me for so long. Over the next few weeks, as I pondered my life and the choices I had made, I came to the realization that I deserved better than the constant emotional abuse and the suffocating feeling of being trapped in my own home. With Jake's support and encouragement, I took small steps toward reclaiming control over my life. I began attending therapy sessions to build my self-esteem and develop strategies for navigating the toxic dynamics in my marriage. The journey wasn't without its challenges and setbacks, but my determination to break free from the cycle of abuse and regain my sense of self-worth remained unwavering. Over time, I engaged in candid conversations with Mark about the need for change in our relationship. It was a difficult process, but he gradually recognized the toll that Alice's presence and his own indifference had taken on our marriage. Together, we started setting boundaries and actively worked on improving our communication. The path to reclaiming my life was challenging, but it was a journey I was resolute in pursuing. With the support of friends like Jake and newfound determination, I began rebuilding my self-confidence and finding my voice. Step by step, I knew I had the strength to overcome the nightmare that had consumed my life for far too long. During the first half hour of the party, everything seemed okay. People laughed, clinked glasses, and music filled the air. However, as the night progressed, I noticed Mark growing more distant. He spent more time with others than with me, and when our eyes met, he seemed annoyed. Eventually, Mark disappeared, and my search for him among the guests proved unsuccessful. Turning to less crowded areas of the house, I heard a soft giggle followed by Mark's unmistakable voice. My heart sank even before I reached the door where the sounds emanated. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find Mark with another woman. They were oblivious to my presence for what felt like an eternity. When they finally noticed, Mark's face displayed annoyance rather than guilt or regret. He snapped at me, questioning my apparent lack of courtesy in knocking. Unable to contain my anger, I retorted, "Knocking? Are you serious? What are you doing, Mark?" Trembling not with sadness but fiery rage, I witnessed his face turn red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. He suggested we discuss it at home, but I was done talking. Unable to endure further humiliation, abuse, and disrespect, I stormed out, and Mark neither followed nor called out to me. I returned home alone, my mind racing but surprisingly clear. A line had been crossed, a boundary broken. The next morning, Mark acted as if nothing had happened. It was then that Alice, always ready to take advantage of the situation, decided to speak up. She criticized me for embarrassing myself and Mark. That was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. Embarrassment. You have the audacity to talk to me about embarrassment after everything you and your son have done. I shot back at her, fueled by months of anger and frustration. Alice threatened to call the police, but I didn't back down. "Go ahead," I said as I dialed my own number into the phone. "They might be interested in the package in the kitchen cupboard." Mark looked puzzled, then alarmed. But before he could say anything, the doorbell rang. As I opened the door for the police officers, a strange calm washed over me. It was as if all the chaos and pain had led to this moment of clarity. My nightmare was about to end, and theirs was about to begin. The police officers were professional but puzzled. They said they received a call about a disturbance, and I confirmed it, leading them to the kitchen cupboard. Inside, I showed them the packet of pills. Mark panicked and asked his mother what she had done. The officers turned to Alice. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us," one of them said. Alice stammered, saying the pills weren't hers, but the officer insisted she come. She shot me a look filled with rage as they took her away in handcuffs. I looked at Mark, who appeared to be on the verge of falling apart. "Is this what you wanted, Sarah? To break up this family?" he asked. I couldn't believe it. "Destroy this family?" I repeated, surprised. "Mark, you and your mom ruined this family long before today. You cheated on me, belittled me, and let your mom mistreat me in my own home. The damage was your doing, not mine." He stared at me, his eyes narrowing. "So what now? Do you want a divorce?" he asked. I replied firmly, "For the first time, Mark, it's not about what you or your mom want. It's about what I deserve, and yes, I deserve better than this fake marriage." Within weeks, we started divorce proceedings. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. During the trial, both Mark and Alice faced consequences. Mark was revealed as someone who enabled his mom's behavior, and Alice received a 5-year prison sentence for having illegal substances. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt a mix of emotions. Victory, yes, but also a deep sadness for what our family could have been. Mark avoided my gaze, and I realized the man I had married was a stranger. But I was finally free. Leaving the courtroom, I walked into the sunlight and understood that this was not just an ending but also a new beginning. In the years that followed, I focused on rediscovering myself and healing. Though the scars remained, They reminded me of my own strength, resilience, and self-worth. The nightmare was over, and the lessons I'd learned would stay with me for life. I had faced the worst and survived, emerging as a woman who would never again settle for anything less than what she deserved. Hello, I am a single woman in my 60s. Since childhood, I held on to the belief in a reciprocal philosophy, thinking that my hard work and dedication would be met with equal effort in return. This mindset extended to my relationships, where I believed treating others kindly would result in receiving kindness in return. Even after marriage, I continued to hold this belief, assuming that by being considerate to my husband, he would reciprocate. In today's world, women aren't expected to sacrifice as much. But during my era, societal expectations were different. I willingly made sacrifices for my husband and children, confident that my efforts would contribute to future happiness. However, my marriage and family life didn't unfold as expected. Despite my early mornings and diligent work for the family, complaints and mistakes overshadowed appreciation. At that time, no one mandated that I live this way. I was an ordinary person who married a coworker 4 years my senior due to societal expectations. Despite the societal norms for married women to quit their jobs, I became a full-time housewife after giving birth to my daughter. I had no regrets. I believed it was a natural course of action for family life. Though my life wasn't glamorous like TV dramas, it felt easy and stable. Around my daughter's 9th grade, tragedy struck when my mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. While mourning her loss, I discovered my husband's affair. In the midst of my grief, he found joy elsewhere, becoming uncaring and eventually demanding a divorce. Despite my determination to avoid divorce, my husband's behavior became unbearable. Divorce wasn't as socially acceptable back then, and despite an irresponsible and unkind husband, I resisted the idea. Looking back, I realized my naivety, but more was at stake. My daughter, witnessing the turmoil, felt the impact. Despite my refusal to divorce, I found myself in a deeply miserable situation. During a heated argument about our impending divorce, my father unexpectedly visited. Witnessing the distress in our relationship, he offered me a place to live and encouraged me to leave my husband, taking my daughter with me. Having recently lost his wife and observed his daughter in an unhappy marriage, my father convinced me that persisting in such a difficult situation was futile. Feeling the weight of his concern, I yielded to my husband's request for a divorce. In return, my husband provided me with $3,000 in cash. With my father's support, I secured a 2-bedroom townhouse to live in with my daughter, starting anew. I anticipated the need to work hard to support my daughter, fearing judgment from society for being a divorced woman with a daughter. This concern was particularly heightened as my daughter entered adolescence. During this challenging period, my daughter expressed typical desires of her age, lamenting the perceived consequences of her parents' divorce. Despite the emotional hurt, I knew I couldn't dwell on them forever, determined to provide for my daughter. I embarked on the journey of seeking stable employment. However, being an older divorced woman with a child made securing a job challenging. Undeterred, I took on multiple part-time and nighttime jobs, even engaging in freelance work at home whenever possible. As time passed, my daughter advanced to her senior year of high school. Despite financial constraints, she excelled academically, finding her own way to thrive. Motivated by my desire to ensure her future, I secured a job at a 24-hour restaurant, working 12-hour shifts. 2/3 of my earnings were diligently saved for her college tuition. Despite facing judgment and gossip, especially from some married men who viewed me as an easy target, I persevered for the sake of my daughter. The sacrifices were numerous, but my goal was to provide her with opportunities I never had. As she approached adulthood, I hoped she would understand the struggles I faced in raising her and making a living. Reflecting on these challenges, I realized that having a daughter made my situation both more arduous and meaningful. She became my anchor, giving me the strength to endure and persevere through life's challenges. I held on to the belief that In the future, my grown daughter and I would share stories about the hardships we faced and take pride in our resilience. A year later, my daughter's outstanding performance in the SAT exams earned her admission to Harvard University, a moment of immense joy that made all the previous struggles worthwhile. As she embarked on her college journey, I felt a mix of pride and emptiness. Though I had managed to provide for her education and housing, the absence of her daily presence at home left a void. We maintained close contact through phone calls, and during the initial months of her independence, our bond deepened. Her newfound affection and connection were a source of comfort, and I cherished our evolving relationship. Despite the challenges, my daughter graduated from college without financial setbacks, fulfilling a dream we had worked hard to achieve. Anticipating that we could live together again, I was surprised when she secured a job at a defense corporation and chose to live independently. To support her, I took a bank loan and contributed to the down payment for a condo near her workplace. While I aged and embraced a more unassuming appearance, my daughter thrived as a fashionable career woman. Witnessing her success brought immense happiness, reinforcing the idea that my sacrifices had borne fruit. I found contentment in her achievements, understanding the sentiment of people who say they forget hunger in moments of joy. Despite the financial support throughout her college years, the prospect of her wedding became a new financial responsibility. People questioned why I continued to struggle when my daughter was capable of self-sufficiency. However, I was determined to contribute to her wedding expenses to prevent any condescension from her future in-laws. The belief that sacrificing for her happiness would bring joy to both of us fueled my resilience. On the other hand, as my daughter dated, I noticed a growing distance between us. Initially hurt, I recognized that her adult life and relationships rightfully took precedence. I patiently waited for her to mature and open up to me, understanding that priorities shift during this phase of life. However, on her 27th birthday, I looked forward to celebrating with her. Yet she made it clear that she had plans with someone named Michael and dismissed any preparations. While she may have intended to convey that I needn't go to any trouble, I couldn't help but feel hurt. It was her birthday, a day that held immense significance for me as the day she was born, and her apparent indifference stung deeply. It was challenging to comprehend why my daughter considered spending money on her birthday a waste, given the tight budget. Despite her intelligence, her understanding of her own mother seemed distant. Despite my hurt feelings, I understood she was my only daughter, and I wanted to see her briefly on her birthday, even if it meant taking a day off work. On that day, I meticulously paid attention to my appearance before going to her workplace. However, what awaited me was an unexpected and emotionally charged encounter in the company lobby. I saw my ex-husband with his mistress, individuals I never wished to see again. Doubting how he found out and came there, I frantically called my daughter, only to be abruptly hung up on as she claimed to be busy with a meeting. Feeling dumbfounded, I turned around, only to hear my daughter happily calling her dad and embracing him with a bright smile. Her boyfriend seemed familiar with my ex-husband and his wife, adding to my fury. In that moment, I felt betrayed, as if the whole world conspired against me. Drained of meaning, I hastily left the scene. Reflecting on that day, I felt the desire to confront my daughter and ex-husband, but an overwhelming urge to escape prevailed. Despite my inner turmoil, I couldn't muster the courage to call my daughter. Unexpectedly, my daughter showed up at home one day, announcing her decision to get married and handing me an invitation card. The surprise turned into shock when I saw the names on the card. Although she was my daughter, I felt an intense urge to throw her out of the house. I questioned how she, my own daughter, could present such an invitation. I confronted her, expressing my hurt at being treated like a guest at her wedding, emphasizing my role as her mother. In response, my daughter apologized, stating she felt she had no choice. Despite her desire to marry Michael, she faced scrutiny from his parents over every detail about her. The situation left me grappling with complex emotions, torn between hurt and the desire to understand my daughter's perspective on her life-changing decision. The revelation from my daughter about her concerns regarding my divorced past and the challenges of being a single mother struck me deeply. She explained that revealing this truth could jeopardize her chances of marrying her boyfriend, as her potential in-laws might disapprove. In the face of this revelation, I couldn't help but express my frustration, reminding her of the sacrifices and struggles I endured to raise her, work at a restaurant, and fund her education. My daughter's response. However, her response stunned me. She dismissed the past, stating that her father and his new partner, the woman who played a role in breaking our family, had already met with her future in-laws. In her perspective, the present was what mattered most, and she prioritized her desire for a comfortable life over the difficulties we faced before. Feeling hurt and regretful, I spoke harshly to her for the first time in my life, expressing my disappointment in her attitude. In turn, she suggested that if I wanted to drop her from my life, I should repay her for the money I spent raising her. This exchange led to a heated argument, and she left my house in anger, proclaiming that we were now strangers. Devastated by the turn of events, I questioned the purpose of saving money for her wedding and felt a deep sadness when I looked at the wedding invitation she had left behind, with a different name printed where mine should have been. 3 years later, I received news that my father, who had been living independently to avoid burdening me, had fallen ill. Sadly, I learned about his condition only after his passing. The realization of being a poor daughter to him hit me hard. A few months later, I inherited a small condo where he had lived, a bittersweet reminder of the family ties and struggles that shaped my life. Upon realizing that I had money saved from my daughter's wedding in the savings account, I decided it was time to live for myself, even if it seemed somewhat late in life. I pondered the idea that in today's world, trusting only one child and sacrificing for them might not be the most fulfilling path. It was a realization that I should prioritize my own desires and needs before it became too late for me to enjoy life. As I contemplated this shift in perspective, a real estate broker and close friend from the restaurant where I worked suggested that I consider what I truly wanted to do. Despite societal expectations for women to sacrifice, I felt the desire to break free from that mold and live for myself. I harbored a feeling of regret and sorrow for the sacrifices I made over the years, and I yearned to pursue personal fulfillment. Inspired by my friend, I embarked on studying the real estate business and even delved into auction biddings. With some savings and money from selling my late father's condo, I seized the opportunity to take on a new challenge. In the surprising turn of events, I became a building owner overnight, residing in a prime location. 6 months later, after returning from a mountain climbing adventure, I found myself on the top floor of my building, now transformed into my home. Unexpectedly, someone knocked on my door, and I debated whether to pretend not to be home due to fatigue. However, curiosity prevailed, and I opened the door to find my pregnant daughter with a chubby-cheeked toddler in her arms. Tearful and distressed, she explained that she had been deceived by her husband, who turned violent and had affairs. Faced with impending childbirth and raising her young daughter, she sought refuge with me, despite my initial shock and the lingering hurt from our previous arguments. I couldn't turn my back on my daughter in need. She revealed that she had heard about my newfound success in real estate and wanted assistance. Despite the painful history between us, she pleaded for help, pointing out that she had a share in the money I had acquired from my wedding savings and inheritance. Caught between anger and compassion, I couldn't deny my daughter's plea for help. Despite her past actions, I recognized the vulnerability in her situation and knew that as a mother, I couldn't turn her away. The complexities of our relationship resurfaced, prompting me to grapple with the tangled emotions of love, disappointment, and the inevitability of family ties. I confronted her, saying, "I was the one who saved money for your education and your wedding, but you told me to get out of your life. Do I need to give you money now?" I only said that, but I didn't get any money back from you. It seems that in front of money, there is no use for the bond between a parent and a child. Now that you have money, you don't need a daughter, right? No matter what, I am still your daughter, so I have a right to your money too. I was once very proud of you, thinking that it was because of me that you were able to attend Harvard. But now I see that it was all in vain. I guess I was too busy making a living that I couldn't teach you to be a decent human being. I raised you as someone who is so selfish and can only think of yourself. I don't plan to give you 1 penny, so you can either go back to your husband or your wonderful father. You are too mean. Could you abandon your own daughter? Do you think other people would care for me at all? That wife already ran off with the money, and he has disappeared trying to look for her. If you abandon me, I'll become an orphan. Now I have a child and I'm pregnant, so how could you be so mean to me? Would you be happy if I died like that? When she screamed at me, I couldn't put up with her any longer, so I took out all the money I had in my wallet and threw it at her. Since you are acting so pathetic, I'll give you that. However, never come back to my house because I won't let you in. There's something that I learned in the meantime, just that your life is important. Now my life is important. You cannot put me in and out of your life at your whim. I coldly let my daughter and her child out of my house. Of course, I would not feel good about it since she was my daughter after all. However, I couldn't accept her because she still was as selfish as before, and I couldn't bury the past. However, I felt sorry for my little granddaughter, who was innocent and got kicked out together with her mom. After that, my daughter was too proud and never came to see me again. To be honest, I knew that she was such a daughter. So, has she repented for her past acts and begged me for forgiveness out of a quest? Pretending I was reluctant, but would have found ways to punish her wayward husband. But I was so disappointed that if she erased me from her life to marry her husband, she should have lived happily. Why did my husband and my daughter turn out that way, even though I lived a hard life? Now I see that the only person who is living a life the way I want to is only me alone. Thus, if anyone is living a life like I did on behalf of others, I want to say this one thing for sure. No matter how strong your relationship is with another person, be sure to take care of your life first. Even if everyone in this world betrays you, you will not betray yourself. In the end, happiness is not what you do for others, but what you do for yourself. I want to give that message through my story here. Even though it may seem like a life that's only felt half, I plan to try to fill that remaining half from now on for complete happiness. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope all goes well for you today, and good fortune will be with you. Please cheer for me and write your comments of wisdom in the comment section. Pressing like and subscribing is a big help to me. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
I'm Emma Jean, and I learned early in life that appearances can be deceiving. Growing up in a modest apartment above my parents' small grocery store, I watched them work tirelessly, saving every penny they could. What our neighbors didn't know was that my parents were silent investors in several successful tech startups, teaching me that true wealth doesn't need to announce itself. Remember, Emma, my father would say while counting the day's earnings. Money talks, but wealth whispers. I took those words to heart, excelling in finance and economics while working part-time at our store. By 25, I had my MBA and had quietly built my own investment portfolio worth millions. But I kept my success private, preferring to be underestimated rather than invade. That's how I met Michael. It was a rainy Tuesday at the local coffee shop where I often worked on my laptop, managing my investments while appearing to be just another young professional. Michael rushed in, drenched and frantically checking his watch. The register's card reader is down, the barista announced apologetically. Michael patted his pockets, realizing he'd left his wallet at home. I noticed his expensive but worn briefcase, a gift from someone special, perhaps, and his kind eyes. "I've got it," I said, stepping up to pay. "Oh no, I couldn't," he started to protest. "Consider it karma," I smiled. "Maybe you can return the favor someday." That favor came in the form of dinner the following week. Michael was charming, genuine, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a middle manager at Preston Financial, one of the city's largest investment firms. "It's not the most exciting job," he admitted over pasta, "but it's stable." I liked that he wasn't trying to impress me with false bravado. "Stability is underrated," I replied, thinking of my own carefully managed portfolio. What I didn't mention was that I already owned a significant number of shares in Preston Financial. I've been watching the company for months, noting its potential and its problems. The current management was old school, resistant to necessary technological updates that could streamline their operations. Our relationship blossomed naturally. Michael was kind, honest, and treated everyone with respect, from CEO to janitor. After a year of dating, he proposed with his grandmother's ring. "It's not much," he said nervously, "but it's been in the family for generations." "It's perfect," I assured him, meaning it. The ring's value wasn't in its modest diamond, but in its history of love. Then I met his family, and everything changed. Michael's sister, Catherine, worked as a senior analyst at Preston Financial. She'd fast-tracked her way up through office politics and family connections. From our first meeting, she made it clear she found me lacking. "So, what do you do?" she asked during our first family dinner, wine glass dangling from manicured fingers. "I'm a secretary at Rivera Corp," I said, using my cover job. I did actually work there part-time, mainly to maintain my understanding of day-to-day operations in the finance world. "Oh," Catherine exchanged looks with their mother, Eleanor. "How quaint." Michael always did have a soft spot for charity cases. Michael shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. That silence would become a pattern. After we married, Catherine's disdain grew more obvious. She worked at the same Preston Financial branch as Michael, and her comments became more frequent and cutting. "You know," she told Michael loudly at the office Christmas party, "Sandra from accounting is single now. She's a junior partner, Michael. Much more suitable." I maintained my composure, but Michael's lack of defense stung. He wanted to avoid conflict, he said later. "Keep the peace." What they didn't know was that I'd been steadily increasing my stake in Preston Financial. The company needed modernization, and I was positioning myself to make it happen. My cover as a part-time secretary at Rivera Corp allowed me to observe without suspicion. Then came the merger announcement. Preston Financial was joining forces with Rivera Corp, where I supposedly worked as a secretary. The move would double the company's market share, if it succeeded. Catherine was ecstatic, seeing an opportunity for advancement. Finally, a chance to show the board what real talent looks like, she bragged at family dinner. Unlike some people who can barely manage a filing cabinet. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, nodded approvingly. "It's important to have ambition, dear. Not everyone is content with mediocrity." Her eyes flickered to me. Michael studied his plate. What they didn't know was that I'd orchestrated the merger through shell companies and careful negotiations. I owned 40% of Rivera Corp, soon to be 40% of the merged Preston Rivera Financial Group. The annual company gala would announce the merger's completion. Catherine insisted on having it at her country club, making sure I knew the usual membership fee. "But don't worry," she smiled sweetly, "staff can use the service entrance." The night of the gala arrived. I wore a simple black dress, expensive but understated. Catherine sashayed around in designer silk, introducing Michael to more appropriate women. "Oh, Emma," she called out loudly as I stood alone near the appetizers. The catering staff needed help in the kitchen. I told them you feel right at home there. Laughter rippled through her circle of sycophants. Michael, across the room, pretended to be engrossed in conversation. That's when Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Rivera Corp, walked in. He spotted me immediately. "Mrs. John," he called out warmly. "The woman of the hour." Catherine frowned. "Excuse me?" Mr. Harrison continued, "Everyone, I'd like to introduce our new Chief Financial Officer and major shareholder, Emma John. Without her vision for this merger, none of us would be here tonight." The room fell silent. Catherine's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "That's impossible," she stammered. "She's a secretary." "Oh, I did work at Rivera Corp," I said calmly. "Best way to understand a company is from the ground up. But I've also been one of the largest shareholders in both Preston Financial and Rivera Corp for the past 3 years. Eleanor's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. But the country club membership. "I've been a member for 5 years, I replied. "I'm on the board, actually. Interesting that we never ran into each other, Catherine." Michael pushed through the crowd, his face a mix of shock and something else. Shame, perhaps. "Emma," he started, "why didn't you tell me?" I met his gaze steadily. Would it have changed anything? Would you have finally stood up to them? Before he could answer, Catherine found her voice. "This is ridiculous. I've worked here for 8 years. I've earned my position." "About that," Mr. Harrison interjected, "Mrs. Zhang has brought some concerning documents to our attention. Something about unauthorized trades under client accounts." Catherine's face went from red to white in an instant. "We'll need to discuss this in detail on Monday," he continued. "For now, I suggest you enjoy what might be your last company event." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of shocked faces and hasty congratulations. Eleanor and Catherine left early, claiming headaches. Michael kept trying to catch my eye, but I was busy with actual business discussions. Back at home, the silence was deafening. All this time, Michael finally said, "You let them treat you like that." "Why?" "Because I needed to see who people really were," I replied. "Money changes how people treat you. I wanted to know if I could count on you to stand by me regardless of my bank account." "And did I pass that test?" he asked quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. "What do you think?" The next morning, I headed to my new office early. The weekend security guard did a double take at my upgraded access badge. I was no longer entering through the side entrance as a visiting secretary. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since last night. Dozens of missed calls from Eleanor and Catherine, plus several texts from Michael. "Please come home. We need to talk. I know I messed up. Give me a chance to explain. Emma, I love you. Don't throw away our marriage over this." But I had work to do. The audit team had already gathered in the conference room, armed with the evidence I'd been collecting for months. "Mrs. Zhang," Mr. Harrison greeted me. "Shall we begin?" The evidence against Catherine was damning. She'd been running a sophisticated scheme, making unauthorized trades using client funds, skimming profits, and covering her tracks through manipulated records. The amounts were staggering, over $5 million diverted over 3 years. The clients never noticed because she was careful to target dormant accounts, the head auditor explained. Mostly elderly investors who didn't check their statements regularly. My stomach turned. Elderly investors. A quick check confirmed my suspicion. One of the affected accounts belonged to Michael's grandmother, the same one whose ring I wore. Catherine had stolen nearly $200,000 from her own grandmother's retirement fund. As we reviewed the documents, my assistant interrupted. "Mrs. Zhang, your mother-in-law is in the lobby. She's causing quite a scene." I sighed. "Send her up." Eleanor burst into the conference room, designer handbag swinging wildly. "How dare you? You manipulative. Scheming." "Mrs. Kennedy," Mr. Harrison cut in sharply. "This is a private meeting." "Private? Nothing's private anymore, thanks to this gold digger. Do you know what she's done to our family?" I met her gaze calmly. "Do you know what your daughter has done to your mother-in-law's retirement fund?" That stopped her cold. "What?" I slid the account statement across the table. Eleanor's face paled as she read the numbers. This must be a mistake," she whispered. "No mistake," I replied. "Catherine stole from her own grandmother and dozens of other retirees." Eleanor sank into a chair, her righteous anger deflating. "But she said she was doing so well at work." "She was. At fraud." I stood up. "The police will be here within the hour. I suggest you get Catherine a good lawyer." As if on cue, Catherine burst into the room, Michael trailing behind her. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I've work to do hard." "Save it for the police," Mr. Harrison interrupted. "They're very interested in your creative accounting." Michael stepped forward. "Emma, please. There must be another way. She's my sister." I looked at my husband, really looked at him. "And I'm your wife. Or did you forget that every time she humiliated me?" "I didn't know about any of this," he gestured helplessly at the documents. "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "Just like you didn't want to see how they treated me. It was easier to stay quiet, wasn't it?" Catherine's face had taken on a calculating look. "I have dirt on other people too. If I go down..." "Save your threats," I cut her off. "Every trade, every transfer, every doctored document has been traced. Your dirt won't save you from prison." Eleanor began to cry. "Think of our family name." "Like you thought of your mother's retirement?" I asked quietly. "She trusted you with her account, Catherine." They all did. The police arrived minutes later. As they led Catherine away in handcuffs, she turned to Michael one last time. "Are you really going to let her destroy our family?" Michael stood frozen, torn between family loyalty and moral obligation. In that moment, I made my decision. "Send the divorce papers to my lawyer," I told him. I'll have my things out by tonight. Emma, wait. He caught my arm. I know I failed you. But please, give me a chance to make it right. I gently removed his hand. You had 3 years of chances. Every time they belittled me, every time they treated me like dirt. Those were chances to stand up for your wife. You chose your side long ago. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Catherine pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and theft. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison in order to repay millions in restitution. Eleanor and Michael's father had to sell their country club membership and downsize their home to help cover Catherine's legal fees. I threw myself into transforming Preston Rivera Financial. We implemented stricter oversight measures, modernized our technology, and established a restitution fund for Catherine's victims. Michael's grandmother was the first to receive full compensation. Months passed. I granted Michael an amicable divorce, even letting him keep the apartment. Some called me too generous, but I remembered the kind man who'd forgotten his wallet that rainy day. He wasn't a bad person, just a weak one. One evening, as I worked late in my office, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Michael's grandmother. She walked in slowly, leaning on her cane, my former engagement ring glinting on her thin finger. Michael had returned it to her after our divorce. I owe you a visit, she said, settling into a chair, to thank you for protecting my retirement and to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. Oh, but I do. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Inside was the engagement ring. I want you to keep this. I couldn't possibly. You protected not just my savings, but my dignity. That's worth more than any ring. She smiled sadly. Besides, you were always more of a granddaughter to me than Catherine. After she left, I stood at my office window, watching the city lights flicker on. The ring sat on my desk, a reminder that true worth isn't in what we own, but in what we stand for. Eleanor still tries to contact me occasionally, usually when she needs money. Catherine writes from prison, alternating between threats and pleas for help with her appeal. I forward all communication to my lawyers. Michael sent me one final email. I finally understand what real strength looks like. It's not in keeping the peace, but in standing up for what's right. I'm sorry I learned that lesson too late. Take care of yourself, Emma. I did keep the ring, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd gained: self-respect, clarity, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest wealth lies in being true to yourself. Last week, I approved a new financial literacy program for seniors, free workshops to help them protect their investments. We named it after Michael's grandmother. It felt right, turning past pain into future protection. The morning sun streams through my office window as I review the latest merger proposals. My father's words echo in my mind. Money talks, but wealth whispers. He was right, but he forgot one thing: integrity roars. And that's a sound that even the highest walls of privilege can't silence.
After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay? Or how are you feeling divorcing a wife who doesn't work? Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. Sounds good. Take care." John chuckled as he said this, standing beside him. Emily was wrapping her arm around his, wearing a similar smug expression. "Fine, let's divorce then." I said it so casually that John seemed a bit surprised, but he quickly shared his smile with Emily. Good thing John isn't much of a thinker. It makes my plan easier to execute. After the divorce papers got approved, I decided to start my revenge plan on both of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm a 47-year-old illustrator. I'd also work as a children's book author. I just love drawing. I have 2 childhood friends, John and Emily. They're important friends to me, and John is also my husband. It all started when John asked me out as I was heading to a different college after high school. I was surprised. I'd thought he was into Emily, but I couldn't say no to a confession from John, whom I had secretly liked. After some thought and consultation with Emily, I accepted John's proposal. Emily's behavior had been a bit problematic since teens, but she was still a dear friend to both John and me. However, Emily had a tendency to snatch other people's boyfriends and then dump them once they became obsessed with her, causing problems time and again. Her parents were concerned, so John and I often spent time with her to watch over her. John and I got married when we were 25, 4 years later. Emily brought her fiancé into our lives. His name was George, a professional working for a top-tier company. Nice to meet you, Sarah and John. I've heard so much about you. Looking forward to our future together. George was very polite, and we all got along immediately. We would get together during holidays and vacations, taking trips or going on long train rides to enjoy some drinks. However, things started falling apart after Emily got pregnant 2 years into her marriage. John and I originally had many siblings, so there was no worry about an heir. So we decided we didn't need children. Both of us loved kids, but weren't keen on actively caring for them. Besides, we loved our freedom to travel and enjoy drinks. We often found it heartwarming to see families with children, but it was never more or less than that. When Emily announced her pregnancy, John's attitude started to change. He quit smoking because Emily said she couldn't stand the smell, and even offered to drive her to doctor's appointments using his vacation days. I warned him, George might get upset if you're always with Emily. But John argued back, you have work, don't you? She's our childhood friend, and she's reaching out for help. You're heartless. I said, I've been buying things and helping where I can, but going with her to the obstetrician is crossing the line. When I said that, John frowned, and then he glared at me. Why? Because Emily wants it, right? She says she's anxious about the checkup. I can't just let her go alone if she's anxious. All the more reason for George to go with her, right? If you go with her every time, it's almost like you're the father of the baby in her belly. John, jealous? You're not going to get pregnant anyway, so what's the problem? He didn't take my concerns seriously, and instead started to snap, saying I was being annoying. We had hardly ever had a fight during our marriage, but things changed when Emily got pregnant. Our arguments increased, and that didn't change even after Emily gave birth. In fact, John started spending even more time with Emily and their child, Emma. But when Emma was 6, an incident occurred. It had to do with the attendees of Emma's graduation ceremonies. The day before the graduation, John suddenly started rummaging through the closet. John, what are you doing? Have a meeting tomorrow. John's workplace had a casual dress code, but there was a rule to wear a suit during client meetings, so he always kept a few suits ready. But they were all thrown on the bed now. No, just trying to decide what to wear for the graduation ceremony. What? You're seriously thinking of attending the graduation? Yeah, George, can't make it. Emily asked me. Wait, that's absurd. No matter how you look at it. I inadvertently raised my voice in denial. Immediately, John's face turned sour. I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done so myself when asked, yet it was nonsensical for a childhood friend who wasn't even a biological parent to attend a graduation ceremony. What? You still doubt me and Emily? I'm disappointed that you can't even help out. That's not the point. Point anyway. I'm attending the graduation tomorrow, so iron a shirt properly. John said that and abruptly ended the conversation, leaving me behind and going to the bedroom. I had no choice but to call Emily. Hello, Emily. About tomorrow. Sorry about tomorrow. I'm borrowing John. But won't George be upset about the graduation attendance, Sarah? What are you talking about? Obviously, I haven't told George that the graduation is tomorrow. I'll tell him after the ceremony. I was shocked to learn that George didn't know about the graduation schedule. Upon further questioning, it seemed that Emily hadn't informed George about any of the kindergarten events so far, and John had been acting as the father at the kindergarten, which made me dizzy with its selfishness. Wait a minute, Emily. Isn't that extremely unreasonable? It's disrespectful to George, and just because he's a childhood friend, eh? What's wrong? Sarah, you're scary. Well, see you tomorrow. Wait, Emily. I was trembling with anger at Emily, who unilaterally hung up the phone. Still, in the end, I ironed a shirt, prepared a tie, and the next morning saw John off to Emma's graduation ceremony. Since then, Emily and John started going out more frequently, from once a month to once a week, and then to 3 times a week. Eventually, even George seemed to have some suspicions, and one day, while John and Emily were out, he visited our house alone. I'm sorry for visiting you late at night. There's something that's been bothering me. Is it about the 2 of them? Yes, I would like you to take a look at this. George showed me the GPS history he had installed in Emily's car. It showed that she had been staying at a hotel 3 times a week. All of those days, she was out with John, and just by looking at George's face, I understood what that meant. What do you want to do, George? I want to take revenge on those 2. Me too. I can't forgive them for betraying us after all this time. We started planning our revenge on them secretly. First, I started by increasing my income because I had been saving by doing housework and taking care of Emma. My income had drastically decreased. George switched to working from home. And when Emily and John would go out, he would bring Emma to my house, and we would take care of her together. Neither Emily nor John realized that we knew about their relationship, and we were able to gather solid evidence. Once we had collected enough evidence and were ready to take our revenge, we discovered a shocking truth about Emma. George and I struggled with the decision, but we both agreed that we didn't want to hurt young Emma, so we decided to wait until she was an adult to take our revenge. However, even though we decided to endure for 10 years, I was struck with a serious illness. I needed long-term hospitalization, and even at best, I wouldn't be discharged for at least 2 years. Although I could work from the hospital room, it was certain that I would have to reduce my workload. After informing George about the situation, I consulted John. However, John's reaction was no different from when we were making small talk. I'll visit you once in a while. I felt that John no longer had any affection for me, as he didn't even ask about my condition or the name of the disease. In reality, John only visited once a month or once every 2 months, and after Emma's 15th birthday, she started acting strangely. Although she used to visit me almost every day right after I was hospitalized, she became distant after her 15th birthday. However, neither George nor I could figure out why, and we were puzzled. Even when we asked Emma, she just said, "Don't worry about it." However, we ended up learning the reason from John, who rarely showed up. "Hey, it's been a while." "Yeah, it has." John, who had completely transformed into a flashy appearance, walked in without even knocking. After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay?" or "How are you feeling divorcing a wife who doesn't work? Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. That's the deal. So take care," John said, grinning from ear to ear. Beside him, Emily wrapped her arms around John's with a similar expression on her face. "Fine, let's divorce then," I casually agreed, which seemed to surprise John for a moment, but he quickly exchanged smiles with Emily. It was good that John wasn't the type to think too deeply. That's why my plan worked so well. After receiving a notification that the divorce was finalized from John, I decided to start my revenge plan against the 2 of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. I promptly started to take action. First, I contacted George to transfer hospitals. Then I informed my lawyer that they would be mediating between the 2 parties from now on. George also began to act at the same time. He moved near my new hospital with Emma, and he started to visit me frequently. Emma still had a gloomy expression, but I was happy that she came to see me every day. Most of my belongings were already in the hospital room, so I told John to dispose of the rest. I didn't want to bring anything that the 2 of them might have touched into my new life. Once the hospital transfer and George and Emma's move settled down, I received a call from John. I had only left my seat for a few minutes, but my smartphone already showed 30 missed calls. I answered the phone, feeling exasperated. What? Hey, what the hell is going on? I could hear the voice of a troubled real estate agent behind John's panicked voice. I also heard Emily yelling, which made me feel sick. What do you mean? What's going on? It's obviously about the house. Why do we have to move out? John shouted at me as if it wasn't his fault at all. I replied to him coolly, obviously because that's my house. Huh. John seemed to have completely forgotten. But the truth was the house we lived in was a room I rented as a workspace. When I started to make a living as a freelancer, at that time, I didn't have enough income to maintain 2 houses, and John didn't have enough income to live alone. So he ended up moving into my place. Therefore, Jan had never paid the rent or utility bills for that room. Although I received some money from him for living expenses, it wasn't enough to maintain the place. Unfortunately, that room was already canceled. It was far from the hospital I transferred to, so I had processed the cancellation the day after submitting the divorce papers. I didn't inform him because the real estate agent who knew the situation said they would contact him. George and Emma suddenly disappeared, and our house was sold. What are we going to do about our new house? I don't know. Maybe stay in a business hotel for now. As I turned on the speaker and started working, John yelled in frustration, "Don't screw with me." However, he seemed to remember something and started speaking in a more soothing tone. Well, whatever. When will you transfer the money? We're running low on cash. What are you talking about? Huh? Don't mess around. I told you to pay $1,000, didn't I? Oh, I don't recall agreeing to that. My nonchalant response was met with incoherent screaming from John on the other end of the phone. Apparently, he thought he could get money from me and had been squandering it. Even if he had $1,000 left, how did he plan to get by for the rest of the month? Hey, don't just stay silent. Say something. There's really nothing to talk about. My retort left John momentarily dumbfounded, but he soon started yelling again, growing increasingly annoyed. I addressed John in as cheerful a tone as I could muster. Anyway, we're basically strangers now, so please don't contact me anymore. You'll hear from my lawyer. Huh? Lawyer? Hey, wait a minute. I hung up without listening to John's response. He tried calling back several times, but I ignored it, and eventually the calls stopped. However, angry that I didn't answer, John started ignoring calls from my lawyer. He certainly had a childish side, but I never imagined he'd be the kind of person who didn't mind causing trouble for others. I sighed deeply at John's selfishness. A few months later, after a temporary discharge from the hospital, I visited John's parents' house. In front of me were John and Emily, both looking small and trembling. You telling my parents is a low blow. Oh, I just reported that we got divorced. Jan glared at me in response to my answer, but he shrank back under his father's stern gaze. Actually, I had a great relationship with my in-laws, even visiting and dining with them when John wasn't around. Despite being so well-loved, I felt it was wrong not to share the details of our divorce. So I went to visit them. Is it true that you're remarrying Emily? Yes, it's true. True. Emily, Emma, and I are going to start over as a family. What are you talking about? Your only family is Sarah. She's not my family anymore. John's words made his father frown with a look that seemed to say, "Give me a break." John shook his head a few times, then handed me a piece of paper. It was a bill from a nearby luxury hotel. What's this? It's the bill from the hotel we stayed at. John, acting as if it was obvious, pointed at the bill on the table, then suddenly collapsed. Oh, what the heck, Mom? I didn't raise you to be like this. My mother-in-law, gasping for breath, was met with a look of disbelief from John. Next to him, Emily wore the same expression. Why are you so angry? It's just that the family is changing because I'm getting married. Plus, you'll have a grandchild, a blood-related one at that. Aren't you happy? You two didn't. My mother-in-law, looking as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, glanced at Emily, then turned her gaze to me. Both my in-laws understood that I didn't want children and still treated me as their own daughter. Of course, they treated Emily, my childhood friend, similarly. But there was always a boundary between a daughter-in-law and a friend. I remembered Emily often complaining about that. So I was certain my mother-in-law wouldn't be happy about this situation, and Emily should have known it too. You dote on Emma, right? It'll be your grandchild, so you'll be happy, right? It's because she's a child I've known since she was little. Oh, but half of her blood is from John, right? Even after all this, Emily, showing no sign of remorse and acting as if she couldn't understand the problem, gave me goosebumps. At that moment, someone who had been silent until now spoke up. Enough already. It's disgusting, huh? Emma, who had been playing with her smartphone in the corner of the room, spoke to Emily without looking up. The room fell into a stunned silence. My dad is the only one I consider my father, whether we're related by blood or not. He's the only one. But you know, John has always been the one to attend your school events. I heard everything from Dad, how he was always informed of the event dates after they were over. How eventually even the events themselves were kept from him. But Dad always said I was his daughter, so I am his daughter, and I will never be yours. Emma glared at Emily as she said this. Then, sitting beside me, she switched to a more concerned tone. You know, when I found out about this, I thought you would hate me. But Dad said that wasn't the case, so I came here today. Emma, I love you so much. You were so kind to visit me every day while I was in the hospital. I was really happy, Sarah. Emma, perhaps relieved of her anxiety, teared up and hugged me tightly. It might indeed be a child resulting from an affair between John and Emily. Yet it's a child I've taken care of for 15 years. There's no way I don't have affection for her. Speaking of which, Emily, weren't you curious why I wasn't surprised when I found out Emma is John's daughter? Ah! Emily looked startled. Before she could speak, a new person entered the room. We knew from the start, 10 years ago actually. George suddenly appeared. Understandably so, as she had recently unilaterally demanded a divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I was shocked when you mentioned divorce. Oh, and, unfortunately, you're not divorced yet. The divorce papers are still here. Didn't you notice? What? I figured it wasn't in Emily and John's nature to confirm things. But I couldn't help but be stunned that Emily, despite the 100-day waiting period for women to remarry, hadn't noticed for months. So, Emily is still my wife, and Emma is still my daughter. Well, since there won't be a wife, though. Wait, what do you mean? A 15-year-old can choose their parent. That's not true. Emma wants to be with Mom, right? Emily said that and looked at Emma. Emma frowned at Emily and held my hand. Emily was speechless at that and glared at me. Then, John suddenly burst into laughter. So that's what it is. You two are together, huh? But too bad. Isn't it impossible to live on George's salary alone? Can you stop making weird assumptions? Also, it seems George earns double the amount you think. Emily knows about it, huh? It's probably a bluff. A lol. Besides, it's impossible for you to work while dealing with your illness. You'll just die miserably somewhere. This time, I laughed at John's huge misunderstanding. John, seeing me suddenly start laughing, was getting frustrated. You didn't know about my income, did you, huh? It's probably just a bit more than a part-time job. No, it's different. My annual income is $500,000, huh? John's eyes and mouth were wide open in shock. Emily was also stunned. In fact, over the past 10 years, I had become a popular children's book author, and my income had skyrocketed from essays, interviews, and the like. Moreover, a film adaptation is planned soon, so my income is skyrocketing. Liar. Oh, do you want to see this? I said that and showed Emily my bank account screen. It clearly showed a large amount of money being deposited every month. Emily was at a loss for words when she saw it. Sarah, let's make up, huh? What are you saying? Emily was furious at John's words. Blinded by the money, I watched them blankly and then opened my mouth. Well, if you want to get married, feel free. Oh, and I'll definitely take the compensation for damages, Sarah. Wait, Sarah. Ignoring John's words, I took Emma's hand, and after saying goodbye to my in-laws, I left their house. John originally worked at my father-in-law's company, but it was revealed that he was lying about going out for sales, and he was fired. My father-in-law planned to forcibly put him on a friend's fishing boat and work him to the bone. Working on a fishing boat was tough for an indoor-loving John, and he contacted me several times. But each time, I notified my father-in-law, and eventually, the calls stopped. Emily lost custody to George and got divorced. She seemed uninterested in John, who couldn't afford luxuries and didn't seem to chase after him. She was disowned by her family and lived alone in a rundown apartment. She hadn't worked at all since getting married, and since she had always made others do things for her, she couldn't do anything herself. And there were hardly any places that would hire her as a full-time employee. Still, she had to pay for her living expenses and child support, so she worked multiple part-time jobs and barely made ends meet. After entering high school, Emma worked hard every day to study abroad and go to a prestigious university overseas. Being originally diligent, her dream is to translate my picture books and deliver them to children all over the world, which makes me happy. As for me, my picture books are selling well, and I am receiving more and more offers for anime adaptations and merchandise. My illness is also progressing well, and although I am still hospitalized, my doctor recently told me that I might be able to leave the hospital next year. And one more thing, George and Emma come to visit me every day. Actually, George recently confessed to me with remarriage in mind. I haven't given my answer yet, but I can't help but have feelings for him. He said he wants to live together when I leave the hospital. While thinking about what to answer, I work on my picture books every day, hoping for a happy future for us. I weave stories again today. After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay? Or how are you feeling divorcing a wife who doesn't work? Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. Sounds good. Take care." John chuckled as he said this, standing beside him. Emily was wrapping her arm around his, wearing a similar smug expression. "Fine, let's divorce then." I said it so casually that John seemed a bit surprised, but he quickly shared his smile with Emily. Good thing John isn't much of a thinker. It makes my plan easier to execute. After the divorce papers got approved, I decided to start my revenge plan on both of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm a 47-year-old illustrator. I'd also work as a children's book author. I just love drawing. I have two childhood friends, John and Emily. They're important friends to me, and John is also my husband. It all started when John asked me out as I was heading to a different college after high school. I was surprised. I thought he was into Emily, but I couldn't say no to a confession from John, whom I had secretly liked. After some thought and consultation with Emily, I accepted John's proposal. Emily's behavior had been a bit problematic since teens, but she was still a dear friend to both John and me. However, Emily had a tendency to snatch other people's boyfriends and then dump them once they became obsessed with her, causing problems time and again. Her parents were concerned, so John and I often spent time with her to watch over her. John and I got married when we were 25, 4 years later. Emily brought her fiancé into our lives. His name was George, a professional working for a top-tier company. Nice to meet you, Sarah and John. I've heard so much about you. Looking forward to our future together. George was very polite, and we all got along immediately. We would get together during holidays and vacations, taking trips or going on long train rides to enjoy some drinks. However, things started falling apart after Emily got pregnant 2 years into her marriage. John and I originally had many siblings, so there was no worry about an heir. So we decided we didn't need children. Both of us love kids, but weren't keen on actively caring for them. Besides, we loved our freedom to travel and enjoy drinks. We often found it heartwarming to see families with children, but it was never more or less than that. When Emily announced her pregnancy, John's attitude started to change. He quit smoking because Emily said she couldn't stand the smell, and even offered to drive her to doctor's appointments using his vacation days. I warned him, "George might get upset if you're always with Emily." But John argued back, "You have work, don't you? She's our childhood friend, and she's reaching out for help. You're heartless." I said, "I've been buying things and helping where I can, but going with her to the obstetrician is crossing the line." When I said that, John frowned, and then he glared at me. "Why?" "Because Emily wants it, right? She says she's anxious about the checkup. I can't just let her go alone if she's anxious. All the more reason for George to go with her, right? If you go with her every time, it's almost like you're the father of the baby in her belly. John, jealous? You're not going to get pregnant anyway, so what's the problem?" He didn't take my concerns seriously, and instead started to snap, saying I was being annoying. We had hardly ever had a fight during our marriage, but things changed when Emily got pregnant. Our arguments increased, and that didn't change even after Emily gave birth. In fact, John started spending even more time with Emily and their child, Emma. But when Emma was 6, an incident occurred. It had to do with the attendees of Emma's graduation ceremonies. The day before the graduation, John suddenly started rummaging through the closet. "John, what are you doing? Have a meeting tomorrow." John's workplace had a casual dress code, but there was a rule to wear a suit during client meetings, so he always kept a few suits ready. But they were all thrown on the bed now. No, just trying to decide what to wear for the graduation ceremony. "What? You're seriously thinking of attending the graduation?" "Yeah, George can't make it. Emily asked me." "Wait, that's absurd. No matter how you look at it." I inadvertently raised my voice in denial. Immediately, John's face turned sour. I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done so myself when asked. Yet it was nonsensical for a childhood friend who wasn't even a biological parent to attend a graduation ceremony. "What? You still doubt me and Emily? I'm disappointed that you can't even help out." "That's not the point." "Point anyway. I'm attending the graduation tomorrow, so iron a shirt properly." John said that and abruptly ended the conversation, leaving me behind and going to the bedroom. I had no choice but to call Emily. "Hello, Emily. About tomorrow." Sorry about tomorrow. I'm borrowing John." "But won't George be upset about the graduation attendance, Sarah?" "What are you talking about?" "Obviously, I haven't told George that the graduation is tomorrow. I'll tell him after the ceremony." I was shocked to learn that George didn't know about the graduation schedule. Upon further questioning, it seemed that Emily hadn't informed George about any of the kindergarten events so far, and John had been acting as the father at the kindergarten, which made me dizzy with its selfishness. "Wait a minute, Emily. Isn't that extremely unreasonable? It's disrespectful to George, and just because he's a childhood friend, eh? What's wrong?" "Sarah, you're scary. Well, see you tomorrow." "Wait, Emily." I was trembling with anger at Emily, who unilaterally hung up the phone. Still, in the end, I ironed a shirt, prepared a tie, and the next morning saw John off to Emma's graduation ceremony. Since then, Emily and John started going out more frequently, from once a month to once a week, and then to 3 times a week. Eventually, even George seemed to have some suspicions, and one day, while John and Emily were out, he visited our house alone. "I'm sorry for visiting you late at night. There's something that's been bothering me." "Is it about the 2 of them?" "Yes, I would like you to take a look at this." George showed me the GPS history he had installed in Emily's car. It showed that she had been staying at a hotel 3 times a week. All of those days, she was out with John, and just by looking at George's face, I understood what that meant. What do you want to do, George? I want to take revenge on those two. Me too. I can't forgive them for betraying us after all this time. We started planning our revenge on them secretly. First, I started by increasing my income because I had been saving by doing housework and taking care of Emma. My income had drastically decreased. George switched to working from home. And when Emily and John would go out, he would bring Emma to my house, and we would take care of her together. Neither Emily nor John realized that we knew about their relationship, and we were able to gather solid evidence. Once we had collected enough evidence and were ready to take our revenge, we discovered a shocking truth about Emma. George and I struggled with the decision, but we both agreed that we didn't want to hurt young Emma, so we decided to wait until she was an adult to take our revenge. However, even though we decided to endure for 10 years, I was struck with a serious illness. I needed long-term hospitalization, and even at best, I wouldn't be discharged for at least 2 years. Although I could work from the hospital room, it was certain that I would have to reduce my workload. After informing George about the situation, I consulted John. However, John's reaction was no different from when we were making small talk. I'll visit you once in a while. I felt that John no longer had any affection for me, as he didn't even ask about my condition or the name of the disease. In reality, John only visited once a month or once every 2 months, and after Emma's 15th birthday, she started acting strangely. Although she used to visit me almost every day right after I was hospitalized, she became distant after her 15th birthday. However, neither George nor I could figure out why, and we were puzzled. Even when we asked Emma, she just said, "Don't worry about it." However, we ended up learning the reason from John, who rarely showed up. "Hey, it's been a while." "Yeah, it has." John, who had completely transformed into a flashy appearance, walked in without even knocking. After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay?" or "How are you feeling divorcing a wife who doesn't work? Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. That's the deal. So take care," John said, grinning from ear to ear. Beside him, Emily wrapped her arms around John's with a similar expression on her face. "Fine, let's divorce then," I casually agreed, which seemed to surprise John for a moment, but he quickly exchanged smiles with Emily. It was good that John wasn't the type to think too deeply. That's why my plan worked so well. After receiving a notification that the divorce was finalized from John, I decided to start my revenge plan against the two of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. I promptly started to take action. First, I contacted George to transfer hospitals. Then I informed my lawyer that they would be mediating between the two parties from now on. George also began to act at the same time. He moved near my new hospital with Emma, and he started to visit me frequently. Emma still had a gloomy expression, but I was happy that she came to see me every day. Most of my belongings were already in the hospital room, so I told John to dispose of the rest. I didn't want to bring anything that the two of them might have touched into my new life. Once the hospital transfer and George and Emma's move settled down, I received a call from John. I had only left my seat for a few minutes, but my smartphone already showed 30 missed calls. I answered the phone, feeling exasperated. "What? Hey, what the hell is going on?" I could hear the voice of a troubled real estate agent behind John's panicked voice. I also heard Emily yelling, which made me feel sick. "What do you mean? What's going on? It's obviously about the house. Why'd we have to move out?" John shouted at me as if it wasn't his fault at all. I replied to him coolly, "Obviously, because that's my house." "Huh." John seemed to have completely forgotten. But the truth was the house we lived in was a room I rented as a workspace. When I started to make a living as a freelancer, at that time, I didn't have enough income to maintain 2 houses, and John didn't have enough income to live alone. So he ended up moving into my place. Therefore, Jan had never paid the rent or utility bills for that room. Although I received some money from him for living expenses, it wasn't enough to maintain the place. Unfortunately, that room was already canceled. It was far from the hospital I transferred to, so I had processed the cancellation the day after submitting the divorce papers. I didn't inform him because the real estate agent who knew the situation said they would contact him. George and Emma suddenly disappeared, and our house was sold. What are we going to do about our new house? I don't know. Maybe stay in a business hotel for now. As I turned on the speaker and started working, John yelled in frustration, "Don't screw with me." However, he seemed to remember something and started speaking in a more soothing tone. Well, whatever. When will you transfer the money? We're running low on cash. What are you talking about? Huh? Don't mess around. I told you to pay $1,000, didn't I? Oh, I don't recall agreeing to that. My nonchalant response was met with incoherent screaming from John on the other end of the phone. Apparently, he thought he could get money from me and had been squandering it. Even if he had $1,000 left, how did he plan to get by for the rest of the month? Hey, don't just stay silent. Say something. There's really nothing to talk about. My retort left John momentarily dumbfounded, but he soon started yelling again, growing increasingly annoyed. I addressed John in as cheerful a tone as I could muster. Anyway, we're basically strangers now, so please don't contact me anymore. You'll hear from my lawyer. Huh? Lawyer? Hey, wait a minute. I hung up without listening to John's response. He tried calling back several times, but I ignored it, and eventually the calls stopped. However, angry that I didn't answer, John started ignoring calls from my lawyer. He certainly had a childish side, but I never imagined he'd be the kind of person who didn't mind causing trouble for others. I sighed deeply at John's selfishness. A few months later, after a temporary discharge from the hospital, I visited John's parents' house. In front of me were John and Emily, both looking small and trembling. You telling my parents is a low blow. Oh, I just reported that we got divorced. Jan glared at me in response to my answer, but he shrank back under his father's stern gaze. Actually, I had a great relationship with my in-laws, even visiting and dining with them when John wasn't around. Despite being so well-loved, I felt it was wrong not to share the details of our divorce. So I went to visit them. Is it true that you're remarrying Emily? Yes, it's true. True. Emily, Emma, and I are going to start over as a family. What are you talking about? Your only family is Sarah. She's not my family anymore. John's words made his father frown with a look that seemed to say, "Give me a break." John shook his head a few times, then handed me a piece of paper. It was a bill from a nearby luxury hotel. What's this? It's the bill from the hotel we stayed at. John, acting as if it was obvious, pointed at the bill on the table, then suddenly collapsed. Oh, what the heck, Mom? I didn't raise you to be like this. My mother-in-law, gasping for breath, was met with a look of disbelief from John. Next to him, Emily wore the same expression. Why are you so angry? It's just that the family is changing because I'm getting married. Plus, you'll have a grandchild, a blood-related one at that. Aren't you happy? You two didn't. My mother-in-law, looking as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, glanced at Emily, then turned her gaze to me. Both my in-laws understood that I didn't want children and still treated me as their own daughter. Of course, they treated Emily, my childhood friend, similarly. But there was always a boundary between a daughter-in-law and a friend. I remembered Emily often complaining about that. So I was certain my mother-in-law wouldn't be happy about this situation, and Emily should have known it too. You dote on Emma, right? It'll be your grandchild, so you'll be happy, right? It's because she's a child I've known since she was little. Oh, but half of her blood is from John, right? Even after all this, Emily, showing no sign of remorse and acting as if she couldn't understand the problem, gave me goosebumps. At that moment, someone who had been silent until now spoke up. Enough already. It's disgusting, huh? Emma, who had been playing with her smartphone in the corner of the room, spoke to Emily without looking up. The room fell into a stunned silence. My dad is the only one I consider my father, whether we're related by blood or not. He's the only one. But you know, John has always been the one to attend your school events. I heard everything from Dad, how he was always informed of the event dates after they were over, how eventually even the events themselves were kept from him. But Dad always said I was his daughter, so I am his daughter, and I will never be yours. Emma glared at Emily as she said this. Then, sitting beside me, she switched to a more concerned tone. You know, when I found out about this, I thought you would hate me. But Dad said that wasn't the case, so I came here today. Emma, I love you so much. You were so kind to visit me every day while I was in the hospital. I was really happy, Sarah. Emma, perhaps relieved of her anxiety, teared up and hugged me tightly. It might indeed be a child resulting from an affair between John and Emily. Yet it's a child I've taken care of for 15 years. There's no way I don't have affection for her. Speaking of which, Emily, weren't you curious why I wasn't surprised when I found out Emma is John's daughter? Ah! Emily looked startled. Before she could speak, a new person entered the room. We knew from the start, 10 years ago actually. George suddenly appeared. Understandably so, as she had recently unilaterally demanded a divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I was shocked when you mentioned divorce. Oh, and unfortunately, you're not divorced yet. The divorce papers are still here. Didn't you notice? What? I figured it wasn't in Emily and John's nature to confirm things. But I couldn't help but be stunned that Emily, despite the 100-day waiting period for women to remarry, hadn't noticed for months. So, Emily is still my wife, and Emma is still my daughter. Well, since there won't be a wife though. Wait, what do you mean? A 15-year-old can choose their parent. That's not true. Emma wants to be with Mom, right? Emily said that and looked at Emma. Emma frowned at Emily and held my hand. Emily was speechless at that and glared at me. Then, John suddenly burst into laughter. So that's what it is. You two are together, huh? But too bad. Isn't it impossible to live on George's salary alone? Can you stop making weird assumptions? Also, it seems George earns double the amount you think. Emily knows about it, huh? It's probably a bluff. A lol. Besides, it's impossible for you to work while dealing with your illness. You'll just die miserably somewhere. This time, I laughed at John's huge misunderstanding. John, seeing me suddenly start laughing, was getting frustrated. You didn't know about my income, did you, huh? It's probably just a bit more than a part-time job. No, it's different. My annual income is $500,000, huh? John's eyes and mouth were wide open in shock. Emily was also stunned. In fact, over the past 10 years, I had become a popular children's book author, and my income had skyrocketed from essays, interviews, and the like. Moreover, a film adaptation is planned soon, so my income is skyrocketing. Liar. Oh, do you want to see this? I said that and showed Emily my bank account screen. It clearly showed a large amount of money being deposited every month. Emily was at a loss for words when she saw it. Sarah, let's make up, huh? What are you saying? Emily was furious at John's words. Blinded by the money, I watched them blankly and then opened my mouth. Well, if you want to get married, feel free. Oh, and I'll definitely take the compensation for damages, Sarah. Wait, Sarah. Ignoring John's words, I took Emma's hand, and after saying goodbye to my in-laws, I left their house. John originally worked at my father-in-law's company, but it was revealed that he was lying about going out for sales, and he was fired. My father-in-law planned to forcibly put him on a friend's fishing boat and work him to the bone. Working on a fishing boat was tough for an indoor-loving John, and he contacted me several times. But each time, I notified my father-in-law, and eventually, the calls stopped. Emily lost custody to George and got divorced. She seemed uninterested in John, who couldn't afford luxuries and didn't seem to chase after him. She was disowned by her family and lived alone in a rundown apartment. She hadn't worked at all since getting married, and since she had always made others do things for her, she couldn't do anything herself. And there were hardly any places that would hire her as a full-time employee. Still, she had to pay for her living expenses and child support, so she worked multiple part-time jobs and barely made ends meet. After entering high school, Emma worked hard every day to study abroad and go to a prestigious university overseas. Being originally diligent, her dream is to translate my picture books and deliver them to children all over the world, which makes me happy. As for me, my picture books are selling well, and I am receiving more and more offers for anime adaptations and merchandise. My illness is also progressing well, and although I am still hospitalized, my doctor recently told me that I might be able to leave the hospital next year. And one more thing, George and Emma come to visit me every day. Actually, George recently confessed to me with remarriage in mind. I haven't given my answer yet, but I can't help but have feelings for him. He said he wants to live together when I leave the hospital. While thinking about what to answer, I work on my picture books every day, hoping for a happy future for us. I weave stories again today.
I've been demoted at work, he announced somberly upon arriving home. What? I nearly spilled my tea in shock. His company's recent poor performance and impending restructuring had hinted at potential personnel changes, but I never anticipated it hitting Scott directly. Nevertheless, I felt it was crucial to stand by him during such trying times as his wife. Well, perhaps it's just a stroke of bad luck. Times are tough, and I'm also working, so let's not fret, I replied, trying to maintain a cheerful demeanor. I'm Catherine, 50 years old, currently employed full-time in the back office. I reside with my husband Scott, who is 2 years my senior, our high school sophomore daughter Julia, and my 72-year-old mother-in-law Ethel. While Ethel and I may not always see eye to eye, our interactions are limited to when I'm home since I work outside, so I've chosen not to dwell on it. To my daughter, I advise, your dad is feeling a bit down because of the demotion, but let's try to carry on as usual around him. However, Scott began to unload his frustrations, and as the saying goes, people often vent their frustrations on those closest to them, those they trust the most. And unfortunately, I became the recipient of it all. The following day, while cleaning the hallway on my day off, he passed by and suddenly remarked, "You've put on weight since we got married, haven't you?" Huh? Well, I'm 50 after all. Even the gynecology pamphlets mention that women tend to gain weight around menopause. But according to my company's health checkup, I'm not overweight, I retorted. Then came his heartless words, "Forget the health checkup. Your figure is too unsightly. You're just being lazy. If you're overweight, I'm embarrassed to be seen with you and your barrel-like figure." His sudden cruelty left me speechless, and as he added, "ugly," before retreating to his room and locking the door, I was left bewildered. What? What's happening all of a sudden? I pinched my own side in disbelief. I can pinch it. When I squeeze it between my thumb and forefinger, it fits snugly, and I can tell that I've gained more than enough. But why now all of a sudden? It felt like an arrow had pierced me unexpectedly, the shock so intense that I even forgot I was holding the magician wiper in my hand, which then slipped and clattered loudly to the hallway floor. From that day onward, Scott's treatment of me grew increasingly harsh. To exacerbate matters, my mother-in-law seemed to have overheard the argument from that weekend and decided to intervene. Then tensions escalated further. As I ascended the stairs with a basket of laundry intending to hang the clothes, my mother-in-law awaited me not at the bottom, but at the top of the stairs. She would make remarks like, "Oh, how dreadful. If only you weren't so overweight, we could pass each other on the stairs. I wouldn't have to wait here because your obesity restricts the space for both of us." Moreover, during dinner when I served fried chicken, she'd comment, "Isn't this what's contributing to your weight gain?" and promptly remove my plate. Instead, she'd suggest that only the three of us who weren't overweight should eat. My gynecologist had mentioned that after middle age, one tends to either gain weight or lose it, Yet my mother-in-law remained on the thin side. She was as slim as a dried-up tree, but I managed to tolerate her incessant taunts. Such annoyances had become routine, so I had grown somewhat accustomed to them. What truly wounded me, however, was my husband's behavior. Since that incident, Scott ceased speaking to me. There were no expressions of gratitude or compliments, not even when I served him breakfast. He simply ate in silence and then left the table. He would enter and exit the bathroom without uttering a word. Though we still shared the bedroom, he would merely turn his back to me and immerse himself in his smartphone. I couldn't bear being treated as though I were invisible. One night, summoning my courage in the bedroom, I asked, "Is there a reason you're ignoring me?" His response was cold. "Not really, but I prefer not to engage with anyone other than humans." He continued, "I don't want to be associated with a family member who is this overweight. If you truly care about me, you'll shed some pounds." What? His words left me disheartened. But it's inevitable with age. You understand that, don't you? Even though I walk 1.2 miles for my commute, I'm doing my best in my own way. Despite my efforts to combat the weight gain that often comes with aging, he coldly turned his back, dismissing my struggles. If you're not seeing results, then it's as if you're not trying at all. Don't speak to me anymore. And with that, he truly stopped acknowledging my presence. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law persisted in taunting me about my weight. Whenever meat, fruits, or rice were served, she questioned, "Are you permitted to eat that? Do you realize?" Eventually, I found myself restricted to salads and boiled vegetables. Scott remained silent throughout, merely moving his chopsticks without a word. It seemed my marriage was nearing its end. During my spare moments, I began packing my belongings. If this was the treatment I would receive from Scott, perhaps it was best to disappear altogether. When I confided in my daughter, saying I'm considering moving back to my parents' house, she sympathized. "I understand. I witnessed Grandma and Dad always picking on you during meals. It's painful to watch. I'll come with you, Mom. We can stay with your parents and I can still attend high school from there." And now, tomorrow marks the beginning of the demotion I've been anticipating, right after the winter break. Scott approached with a smile, suggesting, "Let's all have a drink, just this once." Tomorrow, life without subordinates begins for him. I pondered whether he found this situation unbearable. However, by now, I had lost the will to play along. Even his forced smile grated on my nerves. Scott piped up, "Let's enjoy a nightcap with dinner. I'll whip up some wine spritzers." It might have been the first time he had directly addressed me since the demotion announcement. He continued, "Julia can have juice, and I'll fix you a wine spritzer too, Catherine." He then placed the prepared drinks at 3 spots on the table. Odd, why the sudden change? As Scott momentarily turned his back to search for the TV remote, I discreetly sniffed the drink he had poured. What? I detected a faint scent, unmistakably familiar. I knew it from my own culinary endeavors. How could he even think to serve me this? I refused to tolerate it any longer. Between my mother-in-law's constant harassment and my husband's neglect, I had reached my limit. The sight of the wine spritzer pushed me over the edge. "Scott, could you please grab the camembert cheese from the fridge? It's from the local dairy farm, and it's absolutely delicious. I'm grateful for this family time. Would you mind fetching it?" I requested, hoping he would contribute at least this much to our moment of togetherness. As Scott made his way to the fridge, I took the opportunity to swap my drink with the one on the seat to my right. It was Ethel's seat. Upon his return with the cheese, I announced, "Now that we have our snacks ready, I'll go fetch Julia and mother-in-law," loud enough for them to hear. Dinner's served. The two of them joined us in the dining room and took their seats, creating an appearance of a typical family dinner. Except, I didn't have any meatloaf or cornbread salad. Instead, we had stewed chicken soup, camembert cheese, and wine spritzers. Julia opted for juice. "Let's dig in," Julia broke the silence, while Scott and my mother-in-law remained silent. I took a sip of the wine spritzer Scott had prepared, noticing him watching me closely. With a smile, I remarked, "Yeah, it's quite good." "Huh?" Scott muttered something under his breath, but I chose to ignore him. Instead, I focused on my salad before taking another sip of the wine spritzer. Suddenly, a stream of red liquid shot out from my mother-in-law's mouth, resembling Godzilla's fiery breath. "Wait, Grandma, what happened?" my daughter exclaimed, rising from her seat in surprise. Some of the liquid splattered onto her salad. "Did you choke? Are you okay? Julia quickly fetched a towel and returned, offering it to my mother-in-law, who wiped her mouth. However, her reaction was one of disbelief. What? What is this? Grandma, your mouth, it looks like spicy cod roe, my daughter observed, growing increasingly concerned. Hey you! He put it in my drink, my mother-in-law shrieked, attempting to grab me, but I coldly brushed her hand away. It wasn't me, Scott made it, I stated firmly. This dismissal, coupled with the revelation of Scott's involvement, seemed to stun her. What? My mother-in-law screamed, her lips still stained with sauce, before turning to glare at Scott, who was visibly trembling. Leaning towards him, I exerted some pressure by resting my hand on the table. You thought you could sneak it into the wine spritzer, didn't you? I could detect it slightly because I've encountered it before. That was a dash of hell, wasn't it? I confronted him sternly. A drop of hell? I picked it up at the food fair in Alabama. It might not be as renowned as death sauce, but with its subtle lime undertones, I found it more appealing for its homely flavor, I explained. That hint of lime was what I detected, indicating he had added a significant amount to the drink. My mother-in-law likely didn't notice due to the wine spritzer's aroma, or perhaps she mistook the lime scent for part of the drink's flavor. Regardless, this was an exceptionally malicious prank, incredibly vicious. Wait, Dad did that? Julia's expression was one of disbelief. I actually intended for Catherine to have it, Scott admitted. You should switch it with yours. Even if my mother-in-law is foaming at the mouth, it's out of line. Just because she realized it was meant for me, she wants to pass it off to me. I'm not touching that dangerous concoction, I asserted in a hushed tone, maintaining pressure on Scott. And then I confronted him. Explain why on earth you thought pulling such a stunt was acceptable, I recounted. You were putting on weight, and spicy food can boost metabolism. So I figured I'd give it a try, Scott reasoned. Pathetic. What a lame excuse, I scoffed. Did he truly believe such an explanation would suffice? It was utterly embarrassing. Under pressure, my husband hesitated, shifting his chair back slightly. I'm not crazy. This is a legitimate reason to support your diet. Here, swap your cup with mine and have a taste. I made it for you, he urged. Closing in, I saw him retreat. What are you implying? As the one who prepared it, you should be the one to sample it. Come on. Rising from my seat, I grabbed the cup containing the fiery concoction meant for my mother-in-law and tossed it in front of my husband. Setting it aside, I closed the gap once more. After ignoring me and treating me like I'm invisible for so long, did you honestly expect me to drink something you claim to make with a smile out of the blue? Did that not occur to you in your empty head? Isn't it all too childish? Come on, taste it as the one who brewed it. Take some responsibility, I asserted, slamming the table. At the sound, my husband, perhaps hoping to evade further confrontation, rose from his chair and stepped back. Amidst the tense silence, a soft voice broke through. Both my husband and I turned to the source. It was our daughter, Julia. She began to speak, her words sounding strained as if she were forcing them out. Taking out your frustration on Mom, who supports you the most when work gets tough, and subjecting her to repeated cruel treatment. It's like a childish prank. I might not be supposed to say this to my parents, but it's too immature and unbearable to witness. Our daughter stood up, addressing her father directly. Is it wrong to struggle with weight? Mom wakes up early, walks to work, and even packs her own lunch. So it's not fair to say she's not making an effort, she continued, turning to face her grandmother. And you going along with it, taking away Mom's dinner like the fried chicken incident. What Grandma is doing is reminiscent of high school drama. It's embarrassing, she remarked firmly. At these words, a flustered Ethel began to offer a confused excuse. That's not it. I'm just concerned about Julia's mom not gaining any more weight. I want her to feel positively about herself in front of her granddaughter. Besides, Ethel, like Julia, is also struggling with weight. But Julia remained resolute. Compassion is about understanding and supporting the other person. It pained me to see Mom's dinner taken away, especially when she looked so upset. That's not compassion. Mom hasn't had any health issues in her checkups, yet taking away her food is just plain mean. Ethel fell silent, and it appeared Julia was finished addressing her for the time being. She turned her attention back to her father. Mom goes to the gynecologist regularly and stays active, Yet Dad just brushes her aside because she's gained a bit of weight. What's up with that? His indifference creates such tension in the house. Can't you see it? Even Colonel Sanders and Aunt Stella from the cookie ads are on the plump side. Ever heard of happy weight? If Mom becomes a lovely grandmother like Aunt Stella as she gets older, I'd be overjoyed. When I have kids and she's a grandma, wouldn't it be wonderful to say, "Mom, you've reached some happy weight," and share a laugh? That's my dream. Please don't ruin it for me, she stated matter-of-factly, her gaze icy. Despite their blunt delivery, her words warmed my heart like hot milk with cookies. It was pitiful to witness a father admonished by his own daughter. And one more thing, she addressed her father directly. If you're going to disregard someone because of weight gain from aging, remember, with your receding hairline, you could easily be overlooked yourself. The tension in the room was palpable. Her sharp words left a chill in the air, making the living room feel as cold as ice. It seemed she had said all she needed to. Afterward, she turned to me. "That's enough, Mom. It's time to let it go. It'll be better for you." Her words caught me off guard. Let it go? Yes, I should let it go. As I mentioned earlier, my dream is to see you holding my child, saying you've gained some happy weight, and sharing a laugh. For my sake, I want you to be happy because that's part of my dream. So please, let it go. Be happy and fulfill my dream. Her words filled my heart with warmth. Each word she spoke brought me such joy that I no longer cared about being ignored by my husband, the fat shaming from my mother-in-law, or the drink incident. Warm tears streamed down my cheeks. Yes, you're right, I agreed, my vision blurred with tears. Come on, Mom, she patted my back gently, urging me forward. Oh, okay, I mumbled as I fetched a document I had been concealing for some time. What? My husband exclaimed, startled. After enduring a month of being ignored, I reached a decision. I have my bags packed. Let's go our separate ways, I declared, presenting the divorce papers with only my name written on them. I just wanted you to lose some weight. If you had slimmed down as I asked, I would have been satisfied. It wasn't until Julia pointed it out that I realized it was venting. But since you didn't shed any pounds, I thought I'd torment you further. I didn't mean for it to. I didn't expect this outcome, my husband confessed, panic creeping into his voice. Those who failed to notice until things escalated are the ones acting incredibly immature, Julia retorted sharply. Living without her beloved granddaughter is no laughing matter for my mother-in-law. Ethel interjected softly, her voice as gentle as stroking a cat. Julia, dear, you wouldn't want to keep living with us, your grandmothers. Julia shut down Ethel's plea with a firm refusal. I decline. I no longer wish to share the same space as people who behave like middle schoolers. Wait, okay, hold on. I understand. I'll taste it, as you suggest. I'll take responsibility as the one who prepared it, Scott conceded, picking up the glass before him and downing its contents in one gulp. Scott, much like Ethel earlier, ejects a stream of the red liquid from his mouth, leaving him with a set of lobster-like lips. There, see. I took responsibility, didn't I, Julia? Scott proudly declares. Julia captures a picture of them both with their lobster lips on her phone and remarks, "You both are so ridiculous. Mom, let's go," before swiftly exiting the living room. Yeah, I'll follow her lead, I agree. Left behind is a dinner table splattered here and there with the wine cocktail mixed with a drop of hell, along with a husband and mother-in-law sporting red lobster lips. I returned to my parents' house with Julia. Upon explaining the situation at home, both my mother and father are enraged and decide to confront Scott and Ethel. They return with the divorce papers, and I ultimately end up getting divorced. My ex-husband Scott's career hits rock bottom, with no notable achievements in his remaining years. It turns out he had a habit of ignoring issues he disliked, even with his subordinates, which ultimately led to his demotion, a revelation I only recently discovered. Meanwhile, my ex-mother-in-law Ethel, who had been difficult and seldom ventured outside, finds herself in a stalemate within their two-person household. Eventually, I received a call saying, "Things wouldn't be so dull if you and Julia were here." This sentiment is underscored by the 17 years that passed since Julia was born and we lived together. Please come back, I'll stop ignoring you. But I won't be returning. Enjoy indulging while you can. Once you have grandchildren, you'll have more physical work to do, my mother jokes with a smile. That's a good point. Today, like every day, I'm walking to work. Along the way, my boss drives by and stops the car, offering, "Need a ride?" "No thank you, I'm sticking to my diet." "Just get in, Catherine," he insists. "I found a new boyfriend," I announce proudly. Both of us have experienced divorce, which has strengthened our bond and mutual understanding. "Dieting is great and all, but being late would pose a problem," he mentions as he drives. "I've never been late before," I retort, puffing up my cheeks defensively. He glances at me and gently pokes my puffed-up cheek with his finger. "Give me the time you saved by riding in the car today for our conversation," he says with a playful smile, ever the chatty boyfriend.
It's inconceivable for someone lacking an academic background like yours to be involved in teaching, particularly since it could adversely impact her academic performance. Upon discovering that I was providing academic support to my niece, my sister-in-law directed her anger towards me. "Sophia, why are you associating with someone like her? What if you end up like her?" My sister-in-law seemed to perceive my presence as something detrimental, her cold attitude testing my patience. "Amy, think before you speak. Who do you think contributes to our comfortable life? Isn't it because Mary works hard at home?" In response to my mother-in-law's gentle words, my sister-in-law became even more emotional. "Why are you defending her? Isn't it her duty to handle household chores? She's not just doing housework. She works hard and contributes a lot to the household. You just gallivant around without contributing. If anything, you should be grateful to Mary. Do you really believe she's working earnestly? I can't imagine someone like her being interested in essential tasks." My sister-in-law then impulsively grabbed my desktop computer and threw it out of the window. "What are you doing? You're probably pretending to work hard without achieving anything. Leave this house immediately." I rushed outside to check on my computer, but it was damaged beyond repair. I had also lost valuable work data. Her immature actions genuinely shocked and disappointed me. I couldn't fathom continuing to live together under such circumstances. I had been tolerating it for the sake of my relationship with my husband and mother-in-law, but this incident pushed me beyond my limits. I left a message and decided to return to my parents. "I am Mary, 29 years old. Last year, I started a new life with my beloved husband, Scene. Initially, we imagined living in a city apartment as we both worked nearby. However, Scene was always concerned about his mother's health, as she often experienced knee pain due to her previous job. Walking even a short distance required frequent breaks. Knowing this, we suggested living together. Upon hearing our proposal, she brightened up and said, "Mary, you want to live with us? I'm so happy." She's a genuinely kind-hearted person and warmly welcomed me. However, my sister-in-law, Amy, was fixated on academic backgrounds. During our first family meal, my educational background came up, and her demeanor changed. "Mary, you didn't go to college, right? Why would Scene choose someone like you?" She spoke to me in a somewhat harsh manner. "Sis, that's not a nice thing to say. Mary graduated from a national university, and Scene and I graduated from a famous private university. Couldn't you find someone smarter and more charming? What's the merit of marrying someone with a lower education?" My mother-in-law reprimanded Amy, saying, "Stop it, Mary." I'm sorry for the rude things she said, but I was already left speechless. I grew up with my hardworking mother after losing my father at a young age. Unable to afford college, I started working. In such circumstances, I was fortunate to work at a tax accountant office, and another opportunity came my way. My boss encouraged me, saying, "Why don't you try getting a certified public accountant qualification, Mary? I believe you can do it." Encouraged by his support, I embarked on a new challenge, hoping to secure better job opportunities, increase my income, and better support my mother. My husband understood my aspirations and conveyed my efforts to my sister-in-law. However, she remained cold and indifferent. Despite my genuine intentions, my sister-in-law's words cut deep when she uttered, "If Mary becomes pregnant, I hope the child won't take after her and will be intelligent." These words struck me unexpectedly, making me question if my feelings stemmed from having only a high school diploma. Perplexed, I chose not to escalate the situation, refraining from further discussion. Subsequently, my sister-in-law would frequently mock me over trivial matters, commenting on my cooking speed or reminiscing about her university days during casual conversations, seemingly to taunt me. What bothered me more was that she imparted similar comments to her daughter, Sophia. Sophia, being a kind-hearted child, obediently listened to her mother's words. My sister-in-law had high expectations for Sophia, now preparing for her junior high school entrance exam at S Academy Junior High. Although my sister-in-law took a part-time role there without a teaching license, she did it to avoid additional responsibilities. In front of me, she would deliberately tell Sophia, "Let's work hard together for the future." Frustrated, I bit my lip, lacking the courage to confront my sister-in-law and not wanting to drag my husband and mother-in-law into any trouble. Despite our infrequent meetings, I told myself that enduring her behavior would be okay. However, an unexpected development awaited us one day. My sister-in-law suddenly arrived at our house, holding Sophia's hand, and casually announced, "Mom, I got divorced. We'll be staying here for a while. Please take care of us." Both my mother-in-law and I were shocked by this sudden news, questioning why it happened so abruptly. My sister-in-law responded with a sigh, stating, "That man was so annoying till the end. He incessantly complained about the smallest things and never listened to me, yet he decided to divorce just because of that." Before my mother-in-law could continue, she stopped herself. "It's not just that," my sister-in-law replied with a bitter smile. When I asked for alimony during the divorce, he only agreed to pay $600. After being together for so long, I was shocked by the amount. So, I thought it would be better to come back home where I don't have to worry about living expenses. Plus, I wanted to spend more time with you, Mom. She showed a slight smile and held her mother's hand. "I can live peacefully in this house." She then laid back on the sofa, scrolling through her smartphone, with packed bags and boxes scattered around the room. My mother-in-law and I were lost for words, watching this chaotic scene. A look of surprise and confusion was evident on my mother-in-law's face, and I shared those feelings as well. After a while, my sister-in-law handed me some of her clothes, asking, "Mary, can you wash these for me later?" I suggested that they should be sent to the dry cleaners, but she replied, self-centered, "You could do that much for me, right?" From then on, not only did her requests increase, but her troublesome behavior also intensified. One day, I discovered an oil-based pen stain on the laundry, which was clearly her doing. Upon seeing me sigh at the stain, she remarked smugly, "Oh, did I make a little mistake?" Then she added, "People with low education can't even do housework properly, can they? I wonder if there's any value in living for someone as useless as you." Her actions were causing my stress levels to peak. I reached my breaking point and finally decided to discuss it with my husband. "I work all day and still have to deal with housework when I get home. It's a real burden when she purposely makes things difficult." "I understand it's hard for me to see you going through this," my husband replied, listening to me quietly. He promised we'd find a solution together. That night, he confronted my sister-in-law about her behavior. My husband's warm words and actions always gave me a sense of security. However, from the next day, the harassment from my sister-in-law escalated even further. "You think he protects you, don't you? But to others, you just seem overly dependent. Relying only on a man doesn't make you strong. I don't have any intention of being dependent, depending on someone, being protected by them. To others, you might seem like a coward. Can't you stand on your own?" Holding back my emotions became harder with each of my sister-in-law's words. Despite facing many hardships in life and taking pride in overcoming them, I couldn't stand being hurt by her words. Seeing my distress, My husband seemed wary from the constant confrontations with his sister and began avoiding her. However, my sister-in-law's harassment didn't stop with me. It began affecting Sophia as well. She was keen on getting Sophia admitted to S Academy and was eager to send her to a tutoring school. "Sophia, what's this test score? You can't get into S Academy with these grades. I apologize if your grades don't improve. Maybe you will need to hire a tutor. But remember, it's up to how hard you work." Sophia, looking like she was on the verge of tears, nodded. She had already been going to a cram school every day after school, and getting a private tutor would make her lose any free time she had left. Feeling sorry for Sophia, I offered, "Do you want to study with me? I can help you with some things, really. Of course, I'm here for you." From then on, we started studying together, being careful not to get noticed by my sister-in-law. Although Sophia sometimes struggled, she grasped concepts when taught patiently. "Mary, I got 80 points on my test." "That's great," Sophia exclaimed. "You worked really hard." Sharing that success brought genuine warmth to our hearts. My mother-in-law, who noticed our efforts, sometimes cheered us up secretly by sharing delicious cakes with us. The time spent with her and Sophia became my healing moments. However, this peaceful time was short-lived. One day, while studying with Sophia, my sister-in-law unexpectedly returned home. Seeing us, she shouted, "What are you doing? You, with no formal education, are teaching her? I can't believe it. You might make her grades drop. Stay away." Furthermore, my sister-in-law slapped Sophia on the shoulder and yelled, "Why are you spending time with her? Do you want to end up like her?" The way she spoke about me as if I were contagious made my anger boil over. All the things I had been holding back just overflowed. As I told you before, I'd only graduated high school due to financial reasons. Judging someone solely based on their educational background is wrong. "What did you say?" My sister-in-law exploded even more. Hearing the commotion, my mother-in-law intervened, saying, "What's happening here? Mary is getting too close to Sophia. What if her low educational background influences Sophia? Do you know who's ensuring our comfortable lifestyle? Haven't you seen how hard Mary works at home?" My mother-in-law's calm yet pointed words only fueled my sister-in-law's anger. "Why are you defending her? Anybody can do household chores. It's not just chores. She's working hard, contributing to our household. All you do is go out and play, indifferent to what's happening at home. You should be more grateful. Are you saying she has a proper job? I can't believe it." With that, my sister-in-law grabbed my PC from the desk and threw it out the window. "Why would you do that? That job you cherish so much probably isn't that big of a deal. Stop acting so pretentious. Just leave this house already." I rushed outside in a panic to check my computer, but it was broken beyond repair. It contained my work's vital data. Feeling anger and disappointment towards her childish behavior, living together with someone like this became impossible. For a long time, I had valued my relationship with my husband and mother-in-law, trying to protect our household. However, I had felt my limits. That night, I left a note and decided to return to my parents' home. The next morning, I received repeated calls from my sister-in-law, but I ignored all of them. However, within a week, my husband and sister-in-law showed up at my workplace. He strongly conveyed his apologies, saying, "Amy's completely wrong this time. Amy, please apologize sincerely." Though encouraged by Sean, her dissatisfaction was evident from her attitude. Why should I apologize? Sophia's grades have clearly dropped in her absence. Mary's presence must have been important not only for Sophia, but for you as well. Indeed, I had felt guilty deep down about Sophia's academic struggles. It seems there's no other way. Mary, come back home and support Sophia's studies. I never wanted to live with someone with your educational background, but I'll endure it for Sophia's sake. I had wanted to return for Sophia's sake, but her arrogant tone nearly extinguished that desire. If you truly care about Sophia's education, why don't you teach her yourself, Amy? You strongly recommended her to study for exams. So why are you neglecting her? I didn't want to be told anything by someone like you." Encouraged by Sean, her dissatisfaction was evident from her attitude. "I encourage Sophia to study for exams because I don't want her to end up in a lowly position like you. Is that really all there is to it? I want Sophia to grow up to be an elite adult like me. I want her to graduate from a renowned university and build a career like the one I've established at the prestigious S Academy." She continued flaunting her own success. Unable to bear the exchange, my company's director intervened and tried to resolve the matter peacefully. "Excuse me. I assume you are Mary's family. Nice to meet you." "Yes, that's right." My husband greeted the director politely. "I have overheard a little. I'd like to affirm that Mary has shown tremendous capability and contributed significantly to our company." "Really? I never thought you'd hire someone with just a high school degree." Education doesn't solely define a person's abilities. Even compared to university graduates, Mary has been producing equal, if not better, results. My director's words left my sister-in-law with a surprised expression. "Do you truly believe that?" "I think educational background determines one's status and value," the director responded. "Carly, you mentioned you work at S Academy. May I have your name?" "My name is Amy Smith." "You're Miss Smith. I've heard about your troublesome attitude and behavior. Are you implying Mary has been speaking ill of me?" "No, I haven't. I've heard about you from Mary, but I have heard about you from the principal and other staff at S Academy." Amy's eyes widened, clearly taken aback. "Here's the reason." The director handed her a business card that clearly reads Academy Board Chairman. "You're the chairman?" Both my husband and I were utterly shocked, lost for words upon understanding the information on the card. Amy's demeanor changed instantly, her eyes filled with fear and surprise. "I've heard about your behavior and issues within the academy, delegating your work, shirking responsibilities, and even discriminatory actions towards students. Numerous problems have been pointed out." In a panic, Amy responded, "That's not true." Of course, I was considering a direct response. Upon hearing this, my sister-in-law started to panic. "I can't lose my current job. I just got divorced and did stuff to support my daughter and myself," she begged desperately, with a serious look on her face. The principal replied calmly but with deep understanding, "Our school's policies and philosophies are clear. We cannot tolerate work behavior like yours." My sister-in-law was devastated and burst into tears on the spot. The next day, an official notice from S Academy confirmed that she had to leave the school. Unable to hide her shock, she returned home in confusion. Afterwards, she locked herself in her room, and occasional voices of anger and dissatisfaction could be heard. This situation started affecting the family dynamics. Her stress was often directed at Sophia, and the tension in the household grew day by day. "How can you not even solve this simple problem for a sixth grader? This is unacceptable. You will not rest or sleep until you finish this textbook tonight, so make sure to get it right." Sophia had been studying under this strict guidance day after day, and her fatigue was evident on her face. I was worried she might follow Amy's path. "Stop pushing Sophia like this. Think about what you're doing," my mother-in-law interjected, unable to bear the situation. "Mom, shut up. I don't want to hear anything you say." Taking the situation seriously, my mother-in-law finally told Amy to leave the house. "Amy, you can't stay here any longer. Leave now." "Why should I be the one to leave? You're the one pushing Sophia to the brink and harming her mental health. If you care about her as your own daughter, leave this house now." "I can't believe you're trying to take my daughter away from me," my mother-in-law asked the distressed Sophia. "Sophia, what do you want? Do you want to stay in this house or go somewhere else with your mother?" Sophia's answer was clear. "I want to stay in this house. I'm scared to be with Mom." Shocked by these words, Amy lowered her head and cried. But my mother-in-law's resolve was firm, and she escorted her daughter out of the house. "Reflect sincerely on your actions. What you did can never be tolerated." With that, my mother-in-law closed the door. Afterwards, my sister-in-law ended up losing her job and home. She tried various jobs, but due to her personality, she struggled, and her difficult life continued. With her gone, I returned to my mother-in-law's home and regained our peaceful daily life. Sophia regained her peace of mind and started to smile every day. When we learned that she wanted to continue her studies, we, as a couple, decided to support her. A year later, Sophia successfully passed the entrance exam to S Academy, as her hard work finally bore fruit. We felt genuine relief and joy. Now Sophia continues to work hard towards her dream of becoming a teacher, and we hope to continue supporting the path she has chosen.